the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through a perpetually lefty, pinko commie, soy boy cuck, Antifa super soldier filter. But more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig. I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. My tastes range, but mostly exist on opposite ends of the highbrow, lowbrow spectrum. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. I use she, they pronouns. I work in higher ed and run a food pantry. I care about food access, duh, reproductive justice, building a robust social welfare state, and ending the state's domination through the criminal legal system. I'm a staunch defender of the movie Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and I like movies that send me to Jupiter to get more stupider, or to college to get more knowledge. So, Craig, what other pop culture are you getting into these days?
What am I getting into? I have rewatched this weekend X, Ty West's film X. You've seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I haven't seen Pearl yet. Have you seen Pearl?
I have.
All right, so that's next. We watched X with a friend, and then the idea was to watch Pearl afterwards. I think I'm going to have to take these headphones off because everything is echoing in me. So yes, I rewatched X this weekend, and it is awesome. I love that movie. I love Ty West in general. I think Ty West is like the closest that we have to a horror auteur of working directors. How do you feel about Ty West?
I'm a fan of his, but I also like Patiche, whatever, however you say that word. I read things, I don't say them. And I like how like deeply referential he is, and that like after seeing X, I was like, this is a great 70s horror movie.
Oh yeah, I think that's what appeals to me. Is it
what
looks
I
like
wanted.
Just like sleazy, like we saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now let's go make our version of this sleazy nastiness, which I love.
Yeah, and his mimicking of the camera shots. I mean, one of my favorite shots in X is when she's walking out onto the dock and it does that quick zoom back and then it cuts back in, and it's like that is every slasher, or kind of like the pre-slasher, before we get in full 80s stuff, that horror movies that take place at campsites, like it just has that shot to establish like the isolation of this character. And so it's stuff like that where I'm like, ooh, he gets it.
Yeah, and I feel like Ty West especially is just like a student of film and horror films, especially. Like if you see The House of the Devil, have you seen House of the Devil?
Yes, I saw it at the SLC actually in undergrad.
Wow. SLC is the what is it? What is it?
ASLC is the Ask You Student Life Center at Florida State
University. Yeah, and they show like movies and have a pretty nice theater. I haven't been in a while, but it's like pretty big, and I remember it being comfy, cozy.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for free and or nearly free film. So
definitely. The other thing, because I do try to be smart every once in a while, is I'm trying to. I've started reading a book that I really like that I think would appeal probably to you if you haven't already read it. And I started reading The Meritocracy Trap by Daniel Markovits. Have you read that before?
I have not, but from my days in sociology graduate school, I'm quite acquainted with the failures of meritocracy. So what's it bringing to the table?
Yeah, so I'm still fairly early on in the book, but the Meritocracy Trap is basically about Daniel Markovits is this I think he's a lawyer. I don't know. He went to law school. I know that because that's in the book. But he basically is writing about how the kind of false idea that not the false idea. We do live in a society or in a world or in a country that says that we kind of honor meritocracy, which, meritocracy being the hardest working, the most skilled, will go the furthest. And part of the book is him talking about like how it's really hard to argue with that. Like somebody says it's a meritocracy. The best one gets the job. But the book kind of deconstructs like what our meritocracy actually is. Because when you do any sort of deep dive at all, our meritocracy exists in a system of elite colleges and elite training that is usually only available to like rich white people already. So really our system of meritocracy is basically kind of just another way of kind of reinforcing the old aristocracy of like rich families continuing to perpetuate themselves or whatever. I probably fucked that up in the explaining, but that is the general idea, I think, of his book.
It sounded pretty good to me, and I think the key thing is like ideological warfare, right? Like how do we make an argument for, not, we as in you and me, but how does our system make an argument for itself that is self-sustaining? Yeah. And I think, spoiler for the pod, but later, in a bit, when we talk about Bamboozled, I think there's some pretty clear examples of this, especially in that like all white writers room, where scenes. One of the women says, well, maybe there was just nobody who was qualified.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like that is born of an ideology of meritocracy that is infused with and contingent on racism.
Yeah, that response, maybe no one is qualified, is how our meritocracy works. Is that like...
Right.
Yeah. So what about you? What have you been ingesting?
Well, I'll start with a book which relates to movies that I added after I saw what your notes had put in. But I've been reading Vasquez, which is a novelization of Aliens.
Oh shit!
Written by a queer Latina author. It's like brand spanking new. Like it came out in October, I think.
Okay.
Named V. Castro is the name of the author.
Okay.
But it's about Vasquez, our favorite kind of butch daddy from the colonial Marines, in Aliens. James Cameron, 80s flick. But it's about kind of her origin story. Very interestingly, you learn in the first couple of pages that she is bi, not a lesbian.
Okay.
Which I call that into question.
Okay, that was gonna be my question to you. Was, do we like that?
I'm fine with it. But I can test it. But I have read quite a few novelizations from the broader Alien universe.
Okay.
Most of them in Aliens universe specifically, and this is by far the best written. Usually
that's awesome. Yeah.
They're very shittily constructed.
Yeah,
it's just like I'm like, we're playing with the xenomorphs. That's what we're doing. That's why I'm reading this. This is better than that. So I wanted to give an ups to V. Castro, and if you're interested in the Alien broader universe, check it out.
I also have a question. Is that this is a very stupid question, I will preface, which is if you had to novelize a different James Cameron character, who would it be?
Jack from Titanic.
Okay. Mine is 100% Tom Arnold from True Lies.
Ooh.
We need to know. We need to know the backstory.
We went in two very different directions. I like it. And then I don't want to talk about these things very much because they're so new. We're within a week essentially of both of them, or a few weeks of one and literally a week of the other releasing. But I did over Thanksgiving break watch both The Menu and Bones and All in theaters. I want to keep The Menu very short because I would like to suggest that at some point in time in the not so distant future that we cover it for this very podcast.
Okay.
Relevant themes, a tasty morsel, an amuse-bouche of the potentially leftist variety.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bones and All was, I think I need to experience it in the same way that I experienced 2018 Suspiria, which, as I've said before on this podcast, I love.
Mm-hmm.
Of watch it twice in the same week in theaters. It's a nearly 3-hour-long movie. Because the first time I saw Suspiria, I was like, what is going on here? This is like almost incomprehensible to me. I'm digging parts of it and hating other parts of it. And then I saw it a second time, like within 3 days, and was like, this is one of my favorite movies I've ever seen. I don't think Bones and All will have that level of ascent, but I think it is worthy of another view.
Okay.
And if there are people who are interested in both body horror and rambling, Badlands-esque films, then they should see it.
That's all you have to sell me on. I love Badlands. Like Badlands.
You should definitely see this. Also, there's some killer cameos in it. Like,
ooh, really?
Yes,
okay.
Michael Stahlberg
is
in
Michael
it
Stahlberg.
playing totally against type.
So, okay, let me try to guess what against type for Michael Stolberg is.
Okay, yes.
Like a badass.
No, but you're getting warm in the
Like
sense of like the pole, right? The polar opposite that you're seeking of
like
his kind of like nerdy, neurotic.
Like a confident man who gets shit done and doesn't care what others think. Is that closer?
Let's just say he wears overalls and has like shoulder length hair and is very dirty.
Oh yeah, I was going different.
But the confidence is there. Like that's what I'm saying. You're kind of on the right pole. It's just the gloss on it is in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
But I do recommend it. For me, it ended up being like 3 out of 5 stars.
Okay.
But hopefully, someday in the future we can interrogate it.
Hell yeah. Can I also say that I've been not rewatching because I never actually finished it, but I've been watching Boardwalk Empire.
Oh, yes.
And Michael Stolberg is, I said, obviously my answer was that Michael Stolberg's type would be kind of nerdy, neurotic, but in Boardwalk Empire, he's like,
grip like a vice.
Yeah, he is. He's a creepy, like he's a menacing presence in Boardwalk Empire, and I really like that.
I love
also,
that show.
Listen, shouts out to Michael Stolberg. He's a great actor, but Boardwalk Empire was only like 10 years ago. Man, that dude has aged. Cause like in Boardwalk Empire, he looks like young 30s, and then by Call Me by Your Name, he's playing like an elderly father. And like, man, 10 years was rough on that guy. No shade. Oh my God. I'm looking at a young Michael Stolberg picture here, and holy shit.
You're impressed?
Yeah, he was handsome as that. Here, I'm going to turn around so you can see. Look at that guy.
What?
I mean, if that's what I'm seeing.
He kind of looks like the guy from, oh my goodness, what is that actor's name?
Jude Law. That's what I'm getting from this.
Oh, you're gonna have to put this out because I have to search it. No, he's in a bunch of TV shows. He's not in The New Girl. Is he in Happy Endings? What I'm trying to think of. It's like I can visualize him, but not.
Adam Pally.
Oh,
yes. I was pulling it.
Young,
yeah, I can see it a little bit. Yeah.
Young Adam, spelled Yung. Young Adam Pally.
Hell yes. Yeah, Michael Stolberg.
Interestingly, who's also in Happy Endings. We're playing 6 Degrees of Bamboozled.
Mm-hmm.
Damon Wayans.
Junior? Or senior?
Junior.
Because Damon Wayans Jr. is also in New Girl, which you just referenced as well. My wife loves New Girl, and that's one of those shows where, like, I'm sure I'd like it, but I don't know, but I've seen enough of it because it's just always on because my wife loves New Girl.
Yeah, Damon Wayans Jr. is in Happy Endings, but I mean, obviously there's a pretty additional degree.
Right,
there, but it's
now,
close.
do you know that Damon Wayans Jr. and Sr. just signed a deal to do a TV show together?
I did not.
Yeah, so this is going to get into it, obviously. I'm going to look up what that is. Damon Wayans TV show. Great. Love speaking what I'm typing right into the microphone. It's called... Wait, no. Okay, it does not have a name. Damon Wayans and Damon Wayans Jr. are going to star in a father-son comedy for CBS. That's kind of the bad sign, is that it's CBS. So,
Columbia Broadcasting.
Yeah, so we might get like a 2.5 Men style sitcom, but what are you gonna do? Anyway, so what? I forgot. So, what's happening in the world this week that's got you celebrating or in despair?
So, before I say the thing that I wrote down, because since I wrote this down, there's additional reporting that came out today that the Department of Management Services is going to, in the state of Florida, is going to change administrative rules to make it such that it will be nearly impossible to protest in the Capitol Rotunda.
Huh.
And I just want to say, fuck those motherfuckers. Every single one of those undemocratic motherfuckers who hide behind the veil of protecting children. That's literally what they've claimed. Of course, they have to connect their little daisy chain of bullshit together. Fuck them.
What is their specific reasoning?
That one, the legislature is permitted to have different rules in terms of the policing of free speech in service of protecting the delivery of their functions. Okay? Like there is case law that speaks to this, right? Like they can say like if your protest is disrupting the meeting of the chamber or whatever, that they can stop it. But I mean, we know that, you know, there was a head activist and organizer that was arrested this past February in the legislature surrounding abortion and the 15-week ban that they were trying and did successfully pass. Like there's clearly been a ramping up between HB1, right? The bill that, you know, said that there would be reduced liability if people hit protesters with cars if they were in the street, to this. And it's just them clenching down and saying, like, this is, the legislature is a site of contention, and yet these baby bitches cannot allow any form of contention to exist outside of what they can, like, precisely control. So I just want to say fuck them, and it's causing me to despair.
Yes, and rightfully so, because in the Capitol, this is in Tallahassee, of course, the Capitol, like the rotunda is the space where you would protest, right?
Yes, they said that there was some reporting on Florida Politics saying that people chanting "gay, gay, gay, gay" during the debate surrounding
the "Don't Say Gay" bills.
Exactly, which I think was HB7. I think that was like indecent.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So fuck them.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah.
So I wish that the thing that I want to talk about would bring us out of the despair, but the thing that I want to talk about, and I don't really want to talk about the details because obviously the details have been talked about, but the Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs. Yeah, I don't think we need to talk about the details. I don't want to talk about the details. Obviously, you know, our hearts and everything, all that corny shit goes out to everybody that was affected. But the thing that I want to talk about are these right-wing ding-dongs who made it possible. I mean, I don't know how any other way to say this, but they made it possible. We've been dealing with a year's worth of groomer talk and all these things of anything. I mean, to me, it seems the common right-wing tactic is anything LGBT supportive is being funneled through this talk of being a groomer, a pedophile groomer, right?
It's literally a direct copy of the discourse that they used and propagated in the 1970s with Anita Bryant.
Sure.
Whereas the target then was LGBTQ plus school teachers, right? Was a primary focus, that they're going to convert your children. And now it's like so much more diffuse. Somehow it lost a finer point. Now it's like broader and more amorphous than it even was then.
Right. Yeah. And what's really been disgusting is these right-wing ding-dongs who have made this possible by their rhetoric that is encouraging this stochastic terrorism are taking strange victory laps recently. Basically, like I pulled a couple of these because I think they're important just to look at them. Like Tim Pool. Do we know who Tim Pool is? We're aware of Tim Pool?
I deeply, unfortunately, yes.
Yes. Tim Pool, our country's greatest beanie enthusiast, has he tweeted, "We shouldn't tolerate pedophiles grooming kids. Club Q had a grooming event." He's referencing a drag show brunch that they did either that weekend or that day. "How do we prevent the violence and stop the grooming?" So obviously he's framing this in a way of, I care about the children, but the point is being, I mean, there's no simple way to say this, that the LGBT people at Club Q in Colorado Springs brought this on themselves is what he's saying. There's no two ways about that. And Steven Crowder, another famous moron, has he quote tweeted that and said, "Strong legislation to protect children and an armed populace to protect themselves and their kin." So this is clearly, I mean, I don't know what else to call it other than a victory lap, in that they're essentially saying that the way that we protect ourselves from this is to do exactly what this guy did. And just to round it out, the biggest asshole of them all, that Matt Walsh guy who's with the Daily Wire. Oh.
I hope he has sand in his asshole all the time. 100% of the time.
Yeah, I do too. This is also the same Matt Walsh. Let me just make this clear. Who this has been out for a while, but a video was circulating this week of him basically saying that like teenage girls are the best. That's the best time for like pregnancy and mother rearing. This is an old video of Matt Walsh basically advocating for like 15-year-old girls should get pregnant, basically.
It's all part and parcel of the same little glass house that they've built for themselves.
Yep. And Matt Walsh's comments on the Club Q shooting were some of the most atrocious. He said if drag is called... By the way, Matt Walsh just... trans and drag are interchangeable for Matt Walsh. There's no distinction being made. So when he says drag in this quote, he also means trans because he's a moron. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So just FYI. If drag or trans is causing this much chaos and violence, why do you insist on continuing to do it? If according to you, it's putting people's lives at risk, why are you still doing it? Is it that important to you? Which again is a victory lap of these right-wing ding-dongs basically saying you are inviting this upon yourself.
It's a threat. It's
100%.
It's a threat.
It's 100% because his audience knows what that means, and that what that means to his audience is violence against LGBT people is. He's telling them it is inevitable, so why not you? Yes, that is exactly what it is. I mean, to me, there's no two ways about it. I don't know. These people have been encouraging this for years, and it happens. And I think the scariest part to me is that they are taking this victory lap. I don't know. Like, this seems to me a turning point, a really dark turning point, in that there weren't a lot of thoughts and prayers on this one. There were, see, we told you that these people will invite violence, and that is a dark omen to me. I don't know.
And I mean, we can see the way their political movement and regime of repression and cruelty is like a multi-arm, like it's like an octopus, right? It's like, well, you have it in their equivalent of the Fourth Estate, right? We have it with their commentators doing the ideological line. We have it with the politicians, like the legislators in the state of Florida, right, who are enforcing things. Then we have the people that are doing the action on the ground, whether that's like the Operation Rescue people, enacting violence and throwing bricks. The Planned Parenthood in Gainesville has had bricks thrown through its window like twice in like a very short period of time, right? The people who are going and shooting this, but they can maintain the spread enough that they can claim either plausible deniability that the arms don't know about each other, or simply once they've suffocated all of us, it does not matter because there is no movement to rise against them. So I think the important thing is maintaining community connections, developing community defense structures, and building a mass movement so that they can't be allowed to continue, being a Leviathan.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And I perfectly said. I don't know. I don't think we need to add more to that because I am getting angrier and angrier. And we have a movie to talk about, and I can't be in an upsetting mood when we talk about this movie, Bamboozled. The Spike Lee joint. Excuse me. But before we do that, we want to introduce a new segment here, and that's going to be our top 3 segment. Basically, each week, each movie, we want to talk about a top 3, a tangential top 3. This one's not too tangential. This is going to be our top 3
pretty
Spike
squarely
films.
On the nose.
Yeah, this is right on the nose on this one. This is our top 3 Spike films. Which way do we want to go? Do we want to go 1 to 3?
We didn't talk about this. I think we should do like 3 to 1, 2, 2, 1,
like
1.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I couldn't see that, but there was some serpentine motion happening.
There definitely was, and I did peek at yours, and our top 3s are completely different.
Yeah.
So this will be great.
Woo,
perfect.
Spicy.
Why don't you go first? Your number 3 top Spike film.
Okay, so before
top Spike joint.
Top Spike joint. So before I say my 3, I did just want to say like this is really hard, even more so than other filmmakers. One, because the motherfucker is so prolific. He's made so many good movies. And then also in the first like 4 to 5 years of his career, he just smashes like 4 bangers. He releases She's Gotta Have It, School Days, Do the Right Thing, and Mo Better Blues in between 1986 and 1990. So none of those movies are on my list, but like they could have been. Literally all of those movies could have been on my list. So my third pick is, I just had to give them their propers before I dig in this. My third pick is Defy Bloods. And
yes.
I do think it is a wonderfully made movie, and I think I've mentioned before, and if not, certainly in a couple of weeks when we talk about Platoon, like I will bring this up again. I really like Vietnam War movies because of what they can say about anti-colonialism, and making an a war movie that features all Black soldiers in particular has the capacity to speak to those things. But the real prime reason why I'm choosing it is because of the performances in it. Like Delroy
Lindo,
is
he's great.
Whoo! Like, cliche, but tour de force, baby.
He's
like
crazy in that.
Yeah, like his eyes, like his physicality, the emotionality he's bringing to it. So that's why for me it ranks up there.
Yes.
What's your third?
Yeah, I love Defy Bloods. But my third is and this one is, I don't know, I feel like I'm almost prefacing this because I feel like this is not often considered in the Spike canon, but I love it. And my third is He Got Game, which was 1998, I believe. I might be wrong on that. That's right. I don't need to look it up. But He Got Game, obviously Denzel Washington in a great performance as this father who's been sent to prison, and his son is this basketball star, and basically the father's given this ultimatum in that convince your son to go to this college, which is the college that the warden of his prison is affiliated with. And I don't even remember what they hold over his head that they'll give him if they can convince him to go there. But I love it, and I don't know, there's just so much about it that I love. But what I really want to talk about it is that this is one of our only, I feel, truly great films with an actor. Sorry, nope, scratch that. With an athlete placed in the lead role as an actor, which of course in He Got Game is a young Ray Allen is our lead character. And I cannot think of another film that has a athlete as a lead actor who
We're gonna throw hands on this.
Okay, let me hear it, because maybe I didn't think of it.
Wrestlers are athletes.
Okay, I forgot. I wasn't going to consider WWE. I'm sorry. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, my apologies to everyone.
Also, again, spoiler for a future pod, Rowdy Piper.
Yes.
In They Live.
Yep. Okay, so...
But I'll be real with you. I have not seen He Got Game, so I cannot contest. I can't contest that. I want to contest the operationalization
sure.
of the category.
Let me rephrase and say non-wrestling athletes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I'm open to
because
that.
Wrestling, I feel like, lends itself to being a decent performer, obviously. But yes, let's say non-wrestling athlete.
Where does Kevin Durant fit in
What
this?
has he been in? Has he been in something? Did I miss it?
Uncut Gems?
That was Kevin Garnett.
I don't know shit about basketball.
No, you're good. And that's the other reason I love He Got Game, is that I do like basketball. I'm a basketball guy.
I'm not a basketball person.
I like Ray Allen. I'm not a Celtics fan, but that 2008 season, I think, that was Ray Allen and Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. That was an awesome season. That was the year the Celtics won. And Ray Allen's just like, but to answer your question, yeah, I didn't think about that. Kevin Garnett's awesome in Uncut Gems. I do like Uncut Gems a lot too, but I don't think he's the lead in Uncut Gems.
Oh, he's definitely.
This is
not
me
the
just
lead.
preserving my little thing about how there's never been a good movie with an athlete.
Also, mea culpa for getting his name wrong. I don't follow basketball, and I just had a Kevin in my head. So that's
I love Kevin. Let me preface by saying Kevin Garnett, I love him. He's like the corniest dude. He's a corny dude. Like Kevin Garnett's big. Like they even made fun of it on Parks and Rec. But Kevin Garnett has a really cringy moment. I feel like such an asshole because it is a really genuine moment, and like he's being genuine, but it's also really cringy. Where right after the Celtics win in 2008, I think it's 2008, they're interviewing him and they're like, "Kevin, what do you got to say?" And he's like, "Anything is possible. Anything is possible."
That's kind of amazing, and it feels like that is exactly why he was cast in Uncut Gems.
Right. It's dorky as hell, but like kind of a sweet moment, and I love that for him.
A man who would say that could theoretically, in a fictionalized version of himself, be obsessed with an opal.
Yeah, and need. Oh wait, no, did he buy the Furby? He didn't buy the
No.
Furby. No, he didn't buy the Furby. Okay, I'm sorry.
I think that's just the Furby is just shown for illustrative purposes.
Yeah. So what's your number 2 Spike film?
My number 2 is Malcolm X.
Yes, which we get a little shout out in Bamboozled when we get to it.
Yes, we do. We see a moment of it. It's kind of when it pops up, it's almost like not derisive, but there is like kind of a Spike Lee self-reflexivity happening there.
There's
for
a lot
moment.
of that Bamboozled. Yeah.
But Malcolm X is an epic, and I love a movie that is an epic, and it's very unique in that it is an epic that is about Black American experience, and obviously in a much more like specific way about one man's experience that has captivated the cultural and political attention of our country, oftentimes as a boogeyman, and it strips a lot of that back while being still highly stylized in a kind of Spike Lee specific way. And also related to the, I can't remember if you said this out loud or if it's just the note, but all-time great Denzel performance.
Yes, he's great in that. Yeah, oh boy. Yeah, he is really good in that.
What is your number 2?
My number 2 is a slight cheat because I don't think it's a feature film. It debuted on HBO, I think. Yeah. But my number 2 is When the Levees Broke, A Requiem in 4 Parts, which is Spike Lee's 4-part spanning documentary about Hurricane Katrina, but more specifically about the failures of the U.S. government to basically protect New Orleans, and more specifically the Ninth Ward and those low-income neighborhoods, mostly black neighborhoods, that were completely devastated by Hurricane Katrina and the aftermath. And obviously, like, Spike is a very, I want to say, like, a reactive filmmaker. Like you kind of track his movies based on like what he is responding to. And When the Levees Broke, to me, is his most like just absolutely like devastating, his most like it for being a documentary, it feels like his most angry and raw movie. And it's brutal. I've seen it twice. I don't know if I'm sure I'll watch it again sometime, but it is brutal, and it's fantastic. I mean, like, I feel like Spike also, he often gets overlooked as a documentary filmmaker, but he's a great documentarian. Like, he's done the music documentaries and When the Levees Broke, and also Four Little Girls. He's a great documentarian, and When the Levees Broke, I just love. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great pick. I mean, it's an unflinching piece of history making.
Yeah.
And I think that, I know you also work with young people, but I work with young people, a lot of Zoomers. And, working in higher ed is like the Matthew McConaughey joke. Like, they just keep getting younger,
Right,
except
yeah.
I'm not fucking them. I'm just trying to talk to them and give them
clear.
food
Yes,
to make it clear. But I, and not that this is a representative sample, but I feel like I have conversations with young people where I'm like, the like stickiness of the historical record and like the extent to which it lingers and hangs around and that people are reflecting on it seems to be like more fluid, like more like less and less sticky over time. And like with a couple of hurricanes and tropical storms I've hit for, I've had conversations with my students about it, and it's like them like having no idea essentially
Right.
of the depth of depravity and cruelty that happened there, the very explicit racism, the abandoning people to die, leaving people's bodies in the streets. Like, a lot of that is not part, especially if they're not from the Gulf Coast area.
Sure.
And especially if they're, white, not part of our continued like historical legacy that people are inheriting. And so I think making a documentary like that, documentary series that really gives it room to breathe and fully dive in with, again, an unflinching eye, is super fucking important. It's just really important work.
Yeah, and I think that's really that's really insightful, because to me it does feel like that the further we get from it, the more that Katrina is remembered as a natural disaster more than a man-made disaster, and I think the man-made part is more of what happened with Katrina. Like, I think it's very important to remember it not as a natural disaster as much as it is a man-made disaster. And I think Spike's film does a really good job of pointing that out. Just soup to nuts from the beginning of the construction of the levees and how that was just completely shoddily done, and the response and everything. Yeah, like When the Levees Broke is fantastic.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say, as it relates to something you just said, is like really the only lasting cultural impact that I think, especially again for white people, is like the Kanye West moment, right? And so essentially most of the time when people are talking about the fact that Katrina was not a man-made, or excuse me, was a man-made and not a purely natural disaster, it is to like lampoon and laugh at a black man who dared say that in the moments that it was happening.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I know we've already talked about on this podcast like Kanye's heel turn, but like that was
truth telling.
Yeah, and like dangerous for him. Like that was a time when he wasn't Teflon. Like he was a young dude who, like, that was still a time when his career could have been upset by that, and that was an awesome moment. Yeah.
Do you want to say? Yeah. But so here's a serpentine part. You go first.
We're talking about the order in which we should do this, and either this will get cut out or you'll hear us discussing it. So we're gonna move into my number one Spike movie, which mine I feel like is not a surprise. This is kind of at the top of Spike's list, but my number one Spike Lee movie, my favorite, actually, if y'all find me on Letterboxd, you'll see. Let me actually double check this and see. I've got it listed as my number 2 favorite movie of all time, right behind Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is 1989's Do the Right Thing. Spike Lee's, like, not his first film, but the one that kind of burst him onto the scene. He had, I think, School Days and She's Gotta Have It were before that.
Yes.
But Do the Right Thing was the one that kind of like exploded everywhere. I love Do the Right Thing. I love I was trying to think of like what I love so much about the movie, and the only thing I could keep coming back to was just the energy of it. Like it has just an indescribable energy and Do the Right Thing. And I love this movie. Yeah, I love Do the Right Thing. It's goddamn, I can't even think about what. I don't know. This movie just addresses so much, and it lets the characters be themselves in a way that I think is really refreshing for a movie that also has this political message. When oftentimes, like movies with political messages, the characters often get used as like tools or clubs with which to like beat you over the head with. Whereas Do the Right Thing, like all these characters are just so three-dimensional. Like even the ones like that don't have that much screen time. And there is what I think is a direct reference to Do the Right Thing in Bamboozled. Did you catch it? I want to see.
I don't know. Tell me.
It's slightly hidden. I'll wait till we get there because I think that'll be more fun. But yes, I feel like there is a almost direct reference, because we have mentioned that Bamboozled is very self-referential, Spike self-referential, and I do feel like there is an almost direct reference to Do the Right Thing, which we'll talk about when we get there.
Okay. I mean, there's also some like recurrent themes, right? Like the radio show and stuff. But I will say, I mean, I love Do the Right Thing. I want to be very clear.
Yeah.
It not making my list is just a function of like an abundance and embarrassment of riches in his filmography. Thing I want to say about Do the Right Thing is that to me, what makes it such a great movie is that, as I've said several times, like 1,000 times, even though there's only 2 episodes of this podcast, is that I love when movies transcend reality. Like and all those cutaway kind of vignettes, solo shots of people talking into the camera, Rosie Perez dancing, like all those moments communicate something deeply about this block, this community, these characters, their relationships to each other, the racial system that they're enmeshed in, while not like explicitly saying most of those things, you know? So like that's what I really like about it, is it's just like it's got a little zazz, it's got a little magic.
Hell yeah,
you
it's
know?
got all the zazz.
Yeah.
I love now I gotta rewatch Do the Right Thing.
We're gonna spoilers.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Spoilers. So what is your number one Spike film?
Mm, Bamboozled.
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 Hell yeah.
So
that's awesome. I didn't know that until now.
Yeah, it is. It's not like in my like top 5 favorite movies,
Sure.
but it's definitely in my like top 50 favorite movies of all time. And I just think that it's like a fully realized moral, political, and aesthetic force. Like there, of course, and we're gonna talk about, the finer details. But to me, the first time I saw this movie, the second time I saw this movie, the third, fourth, fifth time, it's like this is a puzzle box.
Yes.
That Spike Lee designed and created, and when he opened it, instead of fucking Pinhead coming, it's like the ghost of racism in America shanking you.
Yep.
And like other filmmakers should be so bold to dream as big and to dream like in all directions, like in the past and in the future, as this movie does, in my opinion.
Definitely. And I feel like it has a weird, it is definitely, I think, an underappreciated Spike movie. Like I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think? What is your prediction for the Rotten Tomatoes score?
Oh, I assume like pretty low. Like I would say like 65.
53.
See, that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah. I know. And I think
meet me outside, whoever is contributing to that.
Yeah. Well, actually, do we want to just get into it?
Yeah,
let's get into it. Before we do, though, let me say one thing really quick. Hal and I are two white people who are going to attempt to deconstruct a film that is very much written about the black experience in America and created by artists who have extensive experience with blackness in America. And neither Hal nor I would ever pretend to be able to speak from that perspective of a black person in America. So when we cover this film, I'm certain that there will be things we miss or nuances that we won't perceive because of our differing experiences as white people. And if we do screw something up or misunderstand, please let us know. My favorite part of being wrong is learning what is right. So with that said, let's get into Spike Lee's 13th feature film, Bamboozled. First off, 13th. Mentally, I was trying to guess how many movies. I would have said like this was number 7 or 8.
I mean, it's wild because this came out in 2000. So his first feature came out in 1986. He released 13 movies in that time period.
And has continued a pretty like prolific career. Yeah, because I feel like he has probably kept the same pace since then. Yeah, but we already heard you love Bamboozled. I will add to that chorus. I also love Bamboozled. Bamboozled is awesome. The thing that I think I like most about Bamboozled, and that this is kind of similar to all of Spike's work, is that like he forces you. He is going to make you engage with this movie in a cultural context. Like there is no escaping it. Like you have to. There's always that like cliche of like don't bring your prior knowledge into a movie, and Spike is like no. Bring all that shit
and if you don't know, go learn.
And if you don't know, I'm here to teach you. And I think Bamboozled is awesome.
And I think he's also, and this is true in a lot of his movies, I think some of his movies more so than others, or the audience shifts a little, but I think especially in this movie, he's speaking in multiple tongues to multiple audiences at the same time. And presenting kind of different tidbits for interrogation, different references that will make sense, wants people to reflect back on different components of it.
100%, yeah. And if I could point out, because you mentioned his forerun of She's Gotta Have It, School Days, Do the Right Thing, and then
Mo Better
Blues, I will say that this is in the midst of what I think is like his underappreciated 4-movie run, which is we have first we've got He Got Game. We've already talked about that. Summer of Sam, which I think is an awesome movie, and I think that's another one that probably has a pretty low Rotten Tomatoes score, even though I haven't looked it up, but its reputation is not the best. Have you seen Summer of Sam?
I have not, but I should. I think there's some of his stuff from like the early 2000s through like early 2010s that I have not.
Yeah. And Summer of Sam was one of the ones that I feel like got overlooked a little bit, but it is audacious and weird and bizarre. And then we've got Bamboozled, and then the fourth one in that 4 run is 25th Hour, which I love and I think is like a definitive 9/11 movie without really being about 9/11. Have you seen 25th Hour?
I have not.
25th Hour is great. It's Edward Norton, and it takes place like in the wake of 9/11. And Edward Norton is a guy who's about to go to prison, and the movie is his last, basically his last day before he has to report to prison.
Okay, I see. 25th Hour. Yeah, I think one of the things that we didn't really talk about Spike yet, and I don't think will really be drawn out through our Bamboozled discussion, is like how many genres, like in addition to his, like the proliferation, how prolific he is. Like he dances around in so many genres.
Yeah. I feel like he's touched every major genre at some point. Like he is. Yeah.
I mean, he's made at least 2 war movies that I could think of.
He's made a horror movie, the Sweet Blooded Jesus. I never saw that, but I know it's about vampires.
Have you seen Ganja and Hess?
No.
It's that year, 2013 and 2014. He made the remake of Old Boy. And then he made the remake of Ganja and Hess. The Sweet Blood of Jesus is a remake of Ganja and Hess. Like back to back. And I'm kind of like, seems like we're lost a little in the wilderness of
Old Boy,
creativity here.
I did not enjoy.
I thought it was fine, but the movie that it's based on is like a fucking amazing movie.
Right. Yeah,
and like,
yeah.
I don't know why you do that. And then The Sweet Blood of Jesus is almost a shot-for-shot remake of a movie that is like sensual, sexual, about colonialism, about like indigenous native religions, about like the positionality of the African American experience to Christianity in the United States and its connections to colonial. Like it's about all these complex things, and it's like he made a direct shot-for-shot remake that doesn't feel sensual at all. And it's just like, why do we do this?
Yep.
You have such a bounty of creativity, and then you remade 2 really good movies at like, I'm gonna say in the 60 to 75% range.
Yeah. And weirdly, I think this is true. I love trivia that starts with I think this is true. But I believe this is true, is that Old Boy is the only movie that he's ever directed that wasn't given a Spike Lee joint in the opening credits.
Interesting.
That may have changed, but I remember at the time of Old Boy's release, it was the only one of his films, maybe not his documentaries, but I believe all of his like narrative features, Old Boy is the only one that doesn't have a Spike Lee joint.
Okay. A thing to investigate later, but I wonder if that has anything to do with like if 40 Acres and a Mule Productions like wasn't involved or something.
I was going to say because it wasn't like it was a remake, but I wonder if
I'm pretty sure it says it at The Sweet Blood of Jesus. It's something that I wanted to mention related to the sense we talked about it that we didn't touch on is there was a 2015 Vulture article written by Sean Fitzgerald in which Spike Lee listed some of his influences. And I think some of those things are really apparent in the movie we're about to talk about, but also they relate to some of this. Like he lists Bill Gunn's Ganja and Hess as one of his biggest influences, right, which he remade. Sidney Poitier is a major influence on him, which he mentioned like in the heat of the night in the course of this interview, but I was also thinking about Pressure Point. I don't know if you've ever seen
never seen that one. Yeah.
That I watched on Criterion Channel a couple of years ago, but he plays a psychologist who is trying to change the mind of a racist.
Okay. Wait, who plays the psychologist?
Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier. Yeah. I'm sorry.
And it has these kind of like surrealist scenes in it that are just not what you would expect from this like kind of jail cell drama.
Sure.
That I definitely see like Spike Lee's some influence in. Also, future discussed on the pod, Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon.
Oh yeah.
He says pretty influential, especially the way action scenes were directed there. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, there's some other things I recommend people look this up if you care about Spike Lee's influences, but also Richard Pryor. And I think that there are some beats, like kind of the approach to humor of Richard Pryor's approach that are really manifestly evident in this, and obviously we're going to talk about Paul Mooney, and Paul Mooney is his
part,
own genius in and of himself.
Paul Mooney part is great. I love the Paul Mooney moment.
Yeah, the suit he's wearing is so...
Oh, I got a lot of thoughts about the suits in these movies. Mostly Pierre Delacroix's suits. But yeah,
the suits that are so big they almost look like David Burns.
It's the Steve Harvey collection of like 17 button suits. So let's get into Bamboozled, which I'll give a real quick synopsis. Bamboozled is kind of Spike Lee's take on The Producers, and that the idea that a TV exec who's kind of had it wants to come up with an idea so outlandish, so offensive that it can't help but disrupt the status quo that he's grown tired of. And his idea, our TV producer is played by Damon Wayans, and his name is Pierre Delacroix, which is a great thing.
That's
AKA
his stated name,
right? AKA Peerless Dothan, I think is his real name.
Peerless is so good, just inspired,
and
really.
A genuine 100% a Spike Lee name. Like, that is Peerless Dothan. There couldn't be a more Spike Lee character name than Peerless Dothan, I feel like. But yes, Peerless Dothan, a.k.a. Pierre Delacroix, comes up with an idea kind of almost out of spite to the channel he works for, that he's going to create a show. They keep pressuring him to create a show that is more black, as they say, or a black show. So he comes up with a just straight up vaudevillian blackface show. And much to his surprise, it ends up being a colossal hit. So yeah, let's dive into it.
We're gonna work our way through.
Yeah. Just giving a real quick synopsis, but I do want to talk about that intro because it's great, and I have highlighted several parts of my notes where I just put vintage Spike and the opening dolly shot of Damon Wayans, Pierre Delacroix, moving through his apartment and his world. That is 100% like a vintage Spike moment of that dolly shot with the character just kind of moving along with the camera. Yeah,
it is. It's also that opening monologue is like a master class in, or maybe not a master class, maybe a 101 class in understanding how media production dynamics impact the content of media. Which is why the first time I saw this class was for a undergraduate sociology of mass media course, and it was used. I would be
so stoked to get that as an assignment.
It was great.
Yeah.
Shouts out Dina Rollinger at FSU. But this is why she used it. I mean, it was about obviously the depiction of race in film, but also because he's just like, I'm gonna explain it to you very clearly here. Outlets of media have proliferated, and now audiences are pulled in 1,000 different directions, and people are scrambling to claim any sub-segment of that audience. And so it's a race to the fucking bottom, and statistics drive everything we do. And it's, the statistics are not value neutral. They follow the patterns of power, right? And he just says this in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
He just teaches a media class in 2 minutes.
Yeah, that monologue is great. Yeah, I mean, do we want to talk about the accent now? The voice,
it's, what since we watched Sorry to Bother You for the previous episode, what I kept thinking about was how David Cross's voice almost sounded like it was.
Yeah, he is doing that idea.
Like he was doing that.
Yeah, because in Sorry to Bother You, they say it's not necessarily a white voice, it's what they think they should sound like, which I feel like is what Pierre Delacroix is doing. And then there's that great moment when he sees Paul Mooney, and Paul Mooney's like, why are you doing that voice? Which is finally the moment where okay, it's not just us thinking this is a weird voice he's doing.
Well, if you think about it, it's like everyone else that we see around him, right, are white people that have power over him, both because of their racial position, but also literally, right, like Michael Rappaport playing his boss, Dunwity, right, as I think of his name. I just, in my notes, everyone else is called by their name, and I'm like, Rappaport, because that guy's like a piece of shit. It sounds like he's playing himself.
My notes literally say, in the first Rappaport scene, it says, I wanted to read it out loud. Michael Rappaport is going to be a problem.
Yes.
That was my first note for Michael Rappaport in this movie. which is kind of descriptive of Michael Rappaport.
That's
as
what
a
I'm
human
saying.
as well.
He's just like playing himself, basically. But like has contact with him, who's like above him, right? Or he has contact with Sloane, who works underneath him, or his contact with Womack and Man Ray, who are beneath him, or all the other people on the show. Eventually, we don't see him with someone that could be a true peer, which because there are no other black folks at his level in the firm, or people that are above him. And it's only until he sees his dad that someone's like, cracks a hammer on this egg and is like, what are you doing?
Right. Yeah. And I think like so much of this movie is about like personal identity and how you identify yourself. And I think that moment, I mean, we'll get to it, but the moment with Paul Mooney where he's kind of like, who are you, basically, is like kind of Spike kind of cracking that whole like theme of identity wide open. But yeah, so we've got Pierre Delacroix, who is this TV executive, the only black TV executive at CNS, which was, I can't remember what CNS means, but that's the channel, the cable news service. That's what we'll call it. And every day on his way in, he passes these street performers, Man Ray and Womack. Man Ray is a tap dancer played by Xavion Glover, who is a famous tap dancer in his own right, and then Womack, played by Tommy Davidson, the comedian. And what I found really interesting is that interaction they have right at the beginning, because one of the first things Damon Wayans says to them is, "You're too talented to be on the street," which I think sets up that idea of these TV companies kind of using black talent in the way that they see as profitable. Like, literally the first thing he says, "You're too talented to be on the street," which obviously the implication is you should be doing this for money to make
for me.
For me, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think something I want to mention that relates to that is just like, and this is, I think that the fact that all of these things coexist in such a short period of time is a real testament to Spike Lee's grace and like kind of bombastic insanity that just works that he approaches his filmmaking with, because there are so many microaggressions and horrible statements, like just explicitly raised. They're not even microaggressions, right? It's like macro nuclear bomb level aggressions.
Almost all of them from Rappaport in this movie,
right?
Yes.
But it's like, it's not just, he says something that I wrote down is early in the film when he's telling everyone, all the writers and execs, that they need to pump out something that's better. It's two white people want to be entertained. I'm blacker than you, as if blackness is something,
an achievement, or like that
it's not socially situated,
that it can be obtained, that it is something that is tangible, or like
it can be passed off. It's a bingo card, right? That you like knock off a certain number of, and he compares Delacroix to Dennis Rodman. He uses the N-word and justifies it in relation to Old Dirty Bastard, using it in rap songs. He refers to his black wife and biracial child. His office walls are covered in black athletes. Like, he is, speaking of bingo cards, he is, right, like trying to aim for this like bingo card version of black identity.
Sure, yeah.
That he can just like fit on like a hat and then discard when it's not convenient.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like this is I feel like, I mean, obviously this came out in 2000, and we see early on Spike really kind of that idea of like the white ally who basically is doing way more damage than they are doing good. Like I think the good example is in Get Out, the Bradley Whitford character of like, I would have voted for Obama third term. Like, this is, Rappaport is like all of that in this movie. He's all of the like performative white allies, and then when the doors close, like saying the most awful stuff.
Well, especially because he's doing this all in the context of having power over his career, right?
Sure, yeah.
So he can, ascribe these labels to himself, kind of put on like the garments, right, so to speak. But ultimately, we know who has control of the checkbook, who has control over whether or not the camera is turning on, and ultimately who has control over the relationship between anyone below him and everyone above him, which is like the board, basically.
Sure.
Also, saying that, I really want to talk about MC Serch. I think
Oh my God.
in this regard,
Yeah.
but I think we should wait a minute until we get, because
I'm so excited to talk about
like
MC Serch.
Yes, same.
Yeah.
There's like a bunch of stuff that happens later in the film where I think it's probably better situated. But I just want to, spoil it for the pod later. We got to talk about MC Serch.
And the one thing, that first conversation that Pierre and Rappaport have, Pierre Delacroix, or Dela as he comes to be known from mostly Man Ray, is the again, Spike being self-referential. He drops his own name in the monologue that Rappaport has, and also throws some shade to Quentin Tarantino, which would later come to be a more real thing. Do you know about their kind of feud?
Yeah. I think feud is,
I would say it's a one-sided. I feel like Spike is telling the truth in what he said, and Tarantino is kind of being a baby about it.
Well, also, I mean, Tarantino has like been in Spike movie,
he's in
like
Girl 6.
Yeah. So it's like, I think, I guess my point is like, I don't think it's a feud. I just think it's Spike Lee being like you said, telling the truth. And then like, if Tarantino is conceiving of that as a fight, he's not understanding the role that Spike is taking here, which is like,
right.
You're wrong, but not worth the energy to like get in the muck with. You know?
And for context, I believe this kind of feud, as we're calling it or not calling it, started around the time of Django Unchained.
No, it pre-exists
earlier?
that.
Okay.
He, Spike Lee, the first kind of like the opening salvo, as far as I know, is like Spike Lee commenting on the frequency with which Tarantino writes the N-word.
Right. Okay. So I was thinking that was around Django Unchained.
No,
how much? But he must have said
sure
it before
he said that around like Jackie Brown.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm almost positive. It's that far back.
I mean, credit to Spike, because I feel like the conversation peaked around Django because the N-word is said so many times. But like, I mean, Tarantino does like to say the N-word in his movies.
Tarantino himself says the N-word in Reservoir Dogs and
and he definitely says it in Pulp Fiction. He says it in the most gratuitous way in Pulp Fiction, which is he gives himself the line when they show up with Marvin, the guy that the dead inward storage. Is what he says. Does it look like this is dead inward storage? Yeah. And like, he clearly relishes being able to say that.
Right. Multiple films in which he scripts that for himself.
So
I believe it predates
it is
that.
A warranted,
but I think probably the fact that Django is written in an exploitation frame, which, I mean, there's obviously a lot of references to that throughout Tarantino's work, but since it is specifically kind of combining a Western approach and like a blaxploitation framework, I think probably elicited greater criticism because, I mean, also there's like really explicit depictions of slavery, which is like, I imagine, salt in the wounds on top of like, using corrosive racist language, and then also the kind of celebratory approach that the reinscribing exploitation framework involves, like, probably didn't sit very right with him. Is what I imagine.
Rightfully so. He also says it, I believe, he says the N-word. He definitely casts himself as a slaver, but does say the N-word also in Django Unchained. And what is maybe the worst cameo from a director of all time. Listen, I like Tarantino. I really like Django Unchained. But when Tarantino tries to unleash an Australian accent in Django Unchained, it is... the walls around me start shaking and the world begins to fall apart because his Australian accent into Django... I just said the D. The D's silent, hillbilly, you asshole. In Django Unchained, his accent is Lord of mercy. It is bad.
I think that one of the marks of a transcendent artist, which I do think Spike Lee achieves in this movie, as well as several of his other pictures, and that Tarantino often struggles with, is like, you also have to be able to edit yourself and chasing every whim is maybe the start of a creative process, but it's not the conclusion of a well-developed, fully matured creative process. And the bitch doesn't know the difference.
So yeah, I think what's really outlined well in these scenes with Rappaport early on is the pressure for black artists to be black in a way that is acceptable to white people, which I think is, I mean, probably Spike's kind of overall theme in this movie is that like black art has always had to fit in this specific box for white audiences to accept it.
Yeah, and that it's ribboned, you know, it's like woven with contradictions because he wants him to be, you know, quote unquote more ghetto than he is. He wants him to be more aggressive and explicit and, you know, like randy and vile, but also not to resist him, right? Or put up a fight. So it's like what it means to be quote unquote like you know, displaying an ideal model of blackness in this space to Rappaport or to the spaces that it's lampooning is like inherently contradictory in a way that puts Delacroix in this like he feels like like he's engaged in fraught code switching, and code switching, I mean, can of course like always be tense, and there's, you know, perhaps if not always, oftentimes risk associated with feeling at it, but he is like doing fucking code switching gymnastics, even though his voice isn't changing, like just in, you know, he's talking to Sloane, he's talking to Womack and Man Ray, he's trying to navigate his own internal, so just he's talking to his dad, he's talking to Rappaport, he's like in this room where he is conducting all of these white people, he's like dancing on a tightrope, he's tap dancing at all times. And I think he's also kind of like a compromised translator because he is almost fully bought in, right? And that's where like Spike Lee is definitely saying something about people that are complicit in their own oppression, because he's not 50-50 on the line. He's like leaning pretty firmly in terms of the accepting the projected goals of assimilation.
Yeah. And then we do get a little bit of a peek into Man Ray and Womack's lives. They are kind of I mean, they're literally like starving artists. We see their home life. They're kind of living in this squalid apartment complex. And in a moment that I think is genius, Spike Lee does that little montage where he intertwines their building being raided by the police with Delacroix's like moment of clarity where he has the idea for the show that he's gonna pitch, which I think is, I mean, it's again a vintage Spike moment of like this intertwining. I mean, he's basically setting up the idea that black pain is going to equal profit for this TV exec, basically.
Yeah, there's two parts about this scene that I really love. The first, which connects with what you've just said, is like the rhythm of it, where
really
it's just
good.
like it cuts, you know, Eureka, oh my god, Eureka, oh my god, with there's like police sirens, and I think that is just builds in a rhythm to the filmmaking that comes up later. We see it with Mau Mau, and some other points in the film, but it's just like just punctuated. You know, it really pushes home what's going on. But then the other thing about it is that it sets up the characterization and like the emptiness of Delacroix's life really well, right? Where he's like watching a TV that has nothing on the screen, that has a sign above it that says feed the idiot box. And he's saying, idiot, feed the idiot box. Like he's disdainful towards himself.
Yeah.
He is not stimulated, right? He's isolated. And then it cuts to but he has a lot of money. He's in a cushy environment. And then it cuts to Man Ray and Womack, who are with each other, talking, interacting. They're watching Chris Rock on the TV and laughing about it, you know, and kind of doing Chris Rock is doing kind of a classic Chris Rock bit. Again,
and I believe that's from the Chris Rock show.
I think so.
Which I think is a prime example of kind of a black creative who did not quite fit into the like TV exec box, which is why the Chris Rock show was not.
Yeah, again, Spike said, you're gonna learn your history.
Right, Spike's like, while we're here, let me also tell you of the shows that got fucked over because TV execs didn't know how to like process black art or whatever, or tried to put black art art into a box that it did not fit into or whatever.
Right. Yeah. But and we see it connecting, like authentically connecting with people. But I just think like the contrast there between like the coldness of a man talking at his TV
yeah.
has not on, and then two people laughing and joking and like kind of being in harmony with each other. Of course, it's like the police intercede and turn it into like an interrupted violent situation. Sure. But I think that's a really good moment for very simply setting up the contrast between the two groups of people and kind of what their trajectories are as a baseline for what their trajectories are throughout the rest of the movie.
Yeah, definitely. And then we do get a great scene between Sloane, who's played by Jada Pinkett Smith, or maybe just Jada Pinkett at this point, I believe.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember what she was billed as.
She's awesome. Let me just put that out there. Like, I love Jada Pinkett Smith. She's cool as hell. I would have slapped the hell out of Chris Rock too. I don't know I don't know. Like, Jada Pinkett Smith is cool. I think if we want to be like TMZ and tabloid about it, I think that the fundamental divide in Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith's relationship is that Jada Pinkett Smith is too cool for Will Smith.
Hard line. I don't know. I like them both. I do think she
I do not like Will Smith.
Oh my god.
Am I stepping into a weird? So
you want to go in on I don't like Will Smith.
I do. I know this is going to be I'm digging myself a grave from which I have a hard time with actors who like have a very like personality where they're like the
Okay, so let's do this. Are there roles that he has played that you like?
For sure.
So it's like you don't like
it's his
the
persona.
person.
It's his if you want a Will Smith role, I don't like a typical Will Smith role. Like I'm also let me put Robert Downey Jr. in that same box of like the actors who are like.
Oh, you weren't a big Dr. Dolittle fan?
I never saw that one. My head went to the Eddie Murphy one, which as a child I loved.
Oh no, I like that.
Made all my friends watch this.
Excuse me, I done goofed. Doolittle, I believe, is actually the name of the Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, but I see what you mean. Like,
there's something about like a super cocky Hollywood guy that is just super off-putting to me. I don't know. The one that's just like they're not necessarily referencing themselves, but every role they're kind of being like the kind of guy, which I think like Will Smith and Robert Downey Jr. are my two like prime examples of. And obviously there are great performances from both of those guys. Shouts out to Ali and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. So nice. I can not just shit on both of those guys. I do like them.
Yeah,
but there is a persona that I just don't connect with.
I think this what I'm about to say is true of both of them, but especially for me with Will Smith. He's a dad actor.
Yeah.
And
just a dork.
As someone
a goof
with a dad that I'm pretty close to and that I watch movies with and watched, in the past many movies with.
Yeah.
I, have some fondness in my heart because, like, do you know how many times I've seen the movie iRobot?
Probably
or
a lot.
I Am Legend.
Ooh.
Or any of the Men in Black movies.
Right.
It's up there. And Ali, I think, is obviously like a standout performance relative to any of those. But, there's some love in the heart for something that's just, to me, it's like, it's a couch classic. It's
sure.
He produced or he made a lot of couch classics.
Definitely. And am I someone who in like the 6th grade made my dad rush home at the end of summer camp to tape Fresh Prince reruns on TBS on my VHS tape? Yes, I am. So like I do have an appreciation for Will Smith. I think it's just the movie star. Like when those dudes hit movie star, there was a persona that I just don't connect with.
I think sometimes when somebody gets the stench of corny on them,
it's all over Will Smith.
It's hard to shake it. But
which I think is the problem because Jada Pinkett Smith seems cool as hell. Like I think she seems cool and he's corny, which I think is what is making the distinction in my brain.
I think the combo together is what I love.
Of those two?
Yeah, like some earnestness, shared interest, someone that's like a little sleeker, that, it's not like apples and oranges. Well, maybe it is like apples and oranges because it's not polar opposites, but it's like of the same general variety, but a little bit of flavor in different directions, But Jada Pinkett Smith talking to
I did get off
at
track.
the time Mos Def, now Yassine Bey.
Yassine Bey as Big Black Africa, aka Big Black Af
from Mau Mau.
The Mau Mau, the group.
Yes, I would love to have a brief digression here because I would bet not all.
That's another good name for this podcast. A brief digression.
A not so brief asterisk, not so brief digression. I did want to take a brief digression here and be a little more didactic, maybe in the spirit of this movie, to talk about Mau Mau and what that means, because I would bet probably not all of the people listening to this right now are familiar with what that is or have any notion.
I might be one of them.
Okay.
I mean, I recognize like what Mau Mau is supposed to be in this movie, but I don't know if there are any direct references beyond that. I might not know them.
Okay, so Mau Mau, which is spelled M-A-U space M-A-U, refers to Mau Mau Rebellion.
Okay.
Which took place in the 50s and very early 60s in Kenya.
Okay.
In the lead up to Kenyan independence from the British Empire. And the reason, so they were like anti-colonial forces that arose among tribes, particularly the Kikuyu tribe in the highlands that surround Nairobi, the capital, in Kenya in the 1950s. And they were very essentially, right, a leftist movement that said, like, fuck your colonial violence and the fact that we have to rely on white British people and Christian missionaries to feed ourselves. Like, we want to have control over our land, control over our bodies, and control over our people. And I found this quote about it that I thought was just like really crystallizes exactly what was going on. And there's a Kenyan politician, journalist, and human rights activist named Koji Wamwere, and in his autobiography, I Refuse to Die, he wrote, "The Second World War taught Africans two lessons. With guns, they could kill white people. And if the German Hitler could be fought, so could the British Hitler." And I want to make it clear, like, that's not really an over-exaggeration. Like, it was extremely violent, right? Genocide is happening here for the purposes of expropriation and claiming, but for profit motive. It's a very classic story where, like, the resistance is cast as terrorism, right? That from a Western, particularly a British perspective, it was like the civilizing Christian missionaries are a foil for these, like, pagan, unrefined shaman that were coming from the grass to kill them. And though it didn't produce independence directly, it led to the conditions that produced independence for Kenyan people. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that the group is named this. One, because of Spike Lee, and two, because they're coming from a marginalized position. To speak to it, the last thing I'll say about the historical context of the Mau Mau is, if you like to read literature, I highly recommend a book called Petals of Blood. Is by Petals of Blood. By the author's name is Ngogi, Ngogi, and it is about just after the Mau Mau rebellion, or kind of like as its vestiges are lingering, and it is a murder mystery novel about essentially some white folks that were killed.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, what is it like to be on the brink or just after independence in terms of people's experiences of it? So people that were just like regular villages and weren't involved in the rebellion or had ties to people in the rebellion, the white people that are still living there and have kind of just transitioned to running everything, but not in a colonial state, kind of in an independence transitional state. It's a really fucking good book, and if you are interested in this at all, I highly recommend. It's not.
Hell yeah!
It's
Give me that
fiction.
title one more time.
Petals of Blood.
Petals of Blood. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm adding that. I don't know if you guys heard in the earlier section, but I'm reading now.
Woo!
So maybe I'll add that to it. Yeah. Hell yeah.
I have
Petals
a
of Blood.
copy. I'm happy to let
I
you
would
borrow
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Mau Mau more because we have Yassine Bey, and then we have the aforementioned MC Serch.
Oh, we talking about MC Serch now?
MC Serch is awesome in this movie. I love MC Serch. If y'all don't know, MC Serch is from the rap group Third Base. But you might also know him as the host of VH1's
The White Rapper Show.
What was it called? The best white rapper, or just the White
literally
Rapper
called
Show?
The White Rapper Show.
Yeah, which was an awesome show.
Early
All the rappers
2000s.
were like straight dog shit. There was like one guy. He might have been the guy that won. That was kind of like a Paul Wall type.
I don't remember what his honestly,
name
I
was,
think
though.
that's disrespectful to Paul
Sorry.
Wall.
Sorry,
who
Paul Wall.
I like.
I also like Paul Wall, but I feel like that guy was. I felt like I was giving him a compliment.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No.
No disrespect, Paul Wall. Paul Wall's cool.
As a diversion.
His mouth. I don't know if you heard, but Paul Wall's mouth has been glowing like a disco ball.
As a digression to the digression, I should find and watch The White Rapper Show again, because I love to go back. Fred and I have been going back and rewatching some of the seasons of The Surreal Life that I used to watch as like a middle schooler and early high school. That would be a good one to revisit. It's good to revisit it because, one, I like trash TV, and two, because it's a great reality check on past conception or layers of bullshit, right? Like of just like, oh no, I did not understand what I was seeing here, or like, we gotta retune. Look at these.
Do you remember? Okay, this was my favorite part of that show. Was, you know, like every show they would have the like Survivor, you are whatever they would say, like they would snuff the torch, and then the weakest link, you are the weakest link, get the fuck out of here. Do you remember what it was in the White Rapper Show?
Was it your whack?
No, it was worse.
What is it?
MC Serch would take your sneakers out into the alley
behind
and throw them.
Yes,
up
I do recall that.
Which was my favorite part of the whole thing. Yeah, but MC Serch is really good in this movie, and I really like him in this movie.
It is truly one of the... There's a lot of parts of this movie that have kind of that double talk, right? Where it's like things are happening on the movie screen, and then things are happening in real life. That it's like, you know, like you need 3D glasses for.
Making you like...
Yes,
engage with it as
as something that's situated and specific and real
and now and
But MC Serch, especially over time.
Oh, his last scene is great.
It just fucking blows my mind. It's like, okay, his name is 1/16th.
Which is hilarious already.
And then, you know, when the eventual shootout happens, which we'll talk about in a little while, he is the only person who lives and is crying about the one drop rule, which, if you're not familiar with, is in the racial regime in the United States. You know, having a single quote unquote drop of black blood in your family line would qualify you as black in terms of systems of domination. Yeah. Right. So he's like crying about that. But then, you know, he's like the host of the White Rapper Show, which I don't recall a lot about it, but I do recall that a lot of it was riding on the gimmick of like, these are white people acting like black people. Right. Which, given how integrated he was deeply, which I'm about to talk about in a second, is offensive and bad.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, very recently, as of October, he announced that he was going to sell off his ownership in Nas's masters, which he owns. What? Yes, which he owns because he was the exec producer on Illmatic and what was the second? It Was Written. And so he has controlled like a significant part of Nas's masters for 3 decades, basically. But by the way, all of that was true at the time this fucking movie came out, because it came out in 2000 and those albums came out in 94 and 96. So there's some stuff going on with him where I'm like, is he aware?
He got rich guy brain, and he's just turning all of his creative endeavors into business decisions.
What is
Nas cool with that? Has Nas mentioned anything?
I have not seen any wide reporting, and then when I was like looking and double checking the timeline of it, because I recalled seeing it, I saw that there were like some YouTube videos, and you know, I was like in my office at lunch, I wasn't gonna play a YouTube video like
researching
of
the
a
Nas
podcast.
MC Serch. Yeah. By the way, like as far as like late career resurgence goes, have you followed like Nas's King Disease albums? I haven't listened to the new one, which he just released, but
I have not. I'm gonna be very real with you. I like my interest in hip hop, which is not insignificant in my life.
Yeah, sure.
Is very driven by production, and I like.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I also like very unique voice that like I
Yeah,
like Danny
yeah.
Brown because of his voice, regardless
Sure.
of production, for example. But kind of classic Northeastern,
Gotcha.
just
Yeah, yeah.
straight off, kind of straight on the chin stuff is not necessarily what I'm
I gotcha.
digging.
Yeah. Well, if you are in Nas's, like, I mean, the appeal to Nas would be his lyricism and not as much the production. No shade
Right,
on
which
the
I respect.
production.
I
Sure.
deeply respect. It's
But
just,
he's put out a trio of albums within the last few years. That's King's Disease 1 through 3, and I haven't listened to 3 yet, so it just came out within the last few weeks. But yeah, he's, I mean, top form for like a late career album.
hell yeah.
So back to Bamboozled. We Pierre Delacroix has this idea that basically, Dunwitty Rappaport tells him we need a show that is black. We need a black show, and basically is kind of tokenizing or forcing Pierre to kind of tokenize his own ideas. So Pierre, kind of out of spite, comes up with this idea that he's certain will backfire, which is he is going to create an entirely blackface show, and for his talent he's going to recruit the fellas he sees out front of his building, Man Ray the tap dancer, and Womack, who's kind of his Flava Flav. I don't know, he's kind of I don't know what's Womack doing when they're before they get the show. He's kind of his hype man.
Yeah, he's his hype man. I think of him again, in the context of wrestling. Think of him as like his manager of LA.
Yeah.
Like he's out there hyping him up. He's cutting promos, getting people. He's also the one who's making sure they get paid. Like he's a wrestling manager.
And as far as the duo goes, we'll see that Womack is kind of the conscience of the group as it goes on.
Oh,
that scene is heartbreaking. Yeah, we'll get to it. That scene is devastating. And Tommy Davidson, actually, everyone is great in this movie. Like Tommy Davidson is really good.
It is. His performance in this movie is such a testament to maybe he, not to like be one of the, maybe he didn't want to do it in the future, but he's an amazing dramatic performer.
Yeah.
Here, like they're, I just feel like it's a testament to the dynamics of racism in media production that Spike is speaking to, that he doesn't have meteor dramatic roles offered to him, because I think it's very clear from his performance in this that could rest squarely on his shoulders.
Yeah. And I think it also goes, it says something that, I don't know, when you hear Tommy Davidson movie role, what do you think? Because I know when I first saw Tommy Davidson in a movie.
Lay it on me.
Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls.
Oh,
and he is very much turned into a caricature. I mean, that whole movie, Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, is a nightmare and a disaster and like super racist. But Tommy Davidson's part, he plays like a tribal. I don't even know. He plays like he plays like a tribal warrior. I don't know, but it's just so straight up racist. And I don't know. Tommy Davidson's career, no shade on Tommy Davidson, that was a job, but his trajectory of kind of going from that and then landing in this just seems like a full circle moment of kind of
he deserves
its
better.
own commentary on like black artists in the like the Hollywood cycle or whatever. But yeah, he's great in this, and also like Damon Wayans is awesome in this. I think
all the performances are really solid. Again, it doesn't really seem like Michael Rappaport is acting based on things I have read and or heard about him. But everyone else is doing a fucking bang up job.
Can I tell you how I first knew who Michael Rappaport was? This is gonna be the dorkiest thing I've ever said. Not the dorkiest, but just this is gonna be embarrassing. Is that I first knew Michael Rappaport because he gave a monologue in some movie, I don't remember what it was, but it goes, "A beautiful girl can make you dizzy, like you've been drinking Jack and Coke all morning." And that was sampled in the Taking Back Sunday album, Tell All Your Friends.
On what track? Like, is it an interstitial?
It's at the beginning of, shit. The one that Flavor Flav is in the video for.
My goodness.
I don't think it was an album version of it. It was like an early one. You're So Last Summer. There's a cut of the album. I don't know if it was in the original album or the extended, but there's a cut of the album which before the song starts, it's Michael Rappaport giving like a really cheesy like monologue from something, saying like, a beautiful girl can make you dizzy, like you've been drinking Jack and Coke all morning. And that's how I first knew who Michael Rappaport was. That, and he was Phoebe's boyfriend, I think, in Friends. Michael Rappaport has an interesting career.
Yeah, he seems a little bit comfortable. If you dig.
Oh yeah, he seems like this is how I imagine the interview, or the meeting between him and Spike went. Is like Spike was like, "Hey, you're gonna have to say the N-word," and Michael Rappaport was like, "No problem, I got it. You're good. We got you." Like that was not. Listen, allegedly. That didn't seem like a stretch for Michael Rappaport. It seemed very comfortable coming off the tongue.
Allegedly. It's really funny to make up something and then say allegedly.
Michael Rappaport owes me $10,000. Allegedly. So we get the idea that Pierre comes up with this idea for the Man-Tan show, which I think goes back again to that stripping you of your identity. Is we have that conversation between Man Ray, the Savion Glover character, and Pierre, where he says like, we're gonna change your name, and there is that moment. And the more I realize, the more like so much of this movie has to deal with like their names and how they perceive themselves in that moment. Like Man Ray has a problem with his name being changed to Man-Tan, and then later we find out that Pierre's name is something that he's changed to make sound more palatable to these white audiences. Yeah, I don't know what my full thought on that is, but this time watching it, I did notice quite a bit how many characters in this movie have names that have been put upon them, or that they've adopted to be more acceptable, I guess.
I think it's an interesting way of, and this is what something that I really fucking love about this movie is that I think a lot of times I want to like satire or dark comedies, but they feel like they're using their like underlying point as a cudgel, like they're just fucking hitting you over the head with it over and over again. And this movie is hitting you over the head.
Yeah,
like Spike Lee is in no way hiding, disguising, or cloaking what he's trying to communicate, but he does it in ways that are like just in a multitude of different ways simultaneously, and slick and clever, such that it's like you get what he's saying, but you want to like rise to meet to understand and decode what he's saying rather than be like, oh, I was just boinked on the head. And I think maybe one way, like, and the reason why I saved this is that I think as it relates to the names is it's like, you know, there are ways that maybe he could talk about, you know, names that are influenced by African languages or names that are distinctly Black American that have stigma or bias associated with them. But rather than just like saying that, or have, you know, Michael Rappaport's character, Dunwitty, whatever, comment, it's Rappaport, comment and say, you know, that name's too Black or whatever in a way that would be very explicit. Instead, he's just like, nope, I'm going to take your name and I'm going to make it into an even more racist trope. Or it is just known from the moment we meet Pierre, his name is something different and it's not revealed till much later. Like, he's still communicating the same thing, but it's a little more graceful. Yeah.
And these scenes with we get where like Pierre pitches the idea to Man Ray and Womack, and they're on board to varying degrees of enthusiasm, I guess. And then there's a scene in here that I think is that direct reference to Do the Right Thing that Spike is doing.
Ooh, lay it on me.
So they're Dunwitty, Rappaport, is pitching the idea to everyone, and they're kind of like, Jesus Christ, man, is this gonna fly? Like, why? Like, you're a white dude? Are you allowed to do this? And one of his responses is he points to all the pictures that he has on his wall, which are like Black athletes and people of Black note, and he says, "Look at all the brothers on the wall." Which, if you remember from Do the Right Thing, yes, Mookie and Do the Right Thing, the direct thing that causes the kind of unrest and Do the Right Thing is Mookie making a big point of the fact that on the wall of fame in the Italian pizza restaurant, he says there are no brothers on the wall, which I found a very like full circle Spike moment, and that we have two different versions of racist white people. The ones who will do everything they can to be like, hey, I know a black person, I'm cool. Like Rappaport in this movie, like, you can't say anything to me. I know black people, I'm cool with black people. Versus and do the right thing.
The total exclusion.
The opposite, the exclusion of black people, which I think, again, is a very specific, like very direct Spike reference to one of his own movies.
Smart. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you raised that. It's also like building off of that demonstration that inclusion is not the sole destination.
Right. Yeah, right? There's like, so many people that think that because I have a black person involved that somehow I'm inclusive or something like that, or that inclusive is just a stat to be checked, I guess.
Right. As opposed, well, it relates to, you know, saying at the beginning of like, as it relates to the media production of like, it's all data driven, right? Like it just matters about the data as opposed to like people's experience. Something I wanted to raise in this scene, because it relates to something briefly talked about in last episode about Sorry to Bother You, which is like the role that libidinal forces play in racism and the ways in which, or, you know, another way of saying that, the ways in which racism is sexualized and like is contingent upon sexual domination. And in that scene with Rappaport, Sloan, Pierre, Man Ray, and Womack, you know, as Delacroix is explaining Mantan to Rappaport, Rappaport says, I really like this. You know how I know? And then he points at his dick and references that he is a boner. And then Rappaport later in that scene says, you know, I can tell, like, you know, Delacroix really dug deep for this to get this idea. And then Delacroix says, yeah, I dug deep into my loins.
Okay. You'd go first.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the idea that, like, there is some, like, pulsating flow that comes from racism and that, like, is associated with the exercise of power is something that is embedded in the functioning of racism in the United States and really fucking around the world, right? But, like, whether that be, you know, the rape of women on black women on plantations who are enslaved people, or the ways in which white women in the South, but elsewhere in the United States as well, could leverage rape claims that led to the lynching of black men. Like, these things are not coincidence. You know, the circuses and freak shows displaying African men and women, and, you know, displaying their genitalia as something to be poked and prodded by strangers as a freak show. Like, these are all things, it's not incidental, it's not coincidental. And so I just thought, you know, again, Spike being like seeding these things in there, planting these seeds in sometimes like very subtle ways. Not that Rappaport pointing at his dick is subtle, but
yeah. So one of my favorite moments in the movie, just as like a great moment, is the audition sequence where we get like, so the studio okays the idea for the Mantan show, this blackface variety show that Pierre comes up with kind of out of spite to the executives, and they have to kind of round out the rest of the show. So they hold auditions, and there are a number of characters who just absolutely steal the show in this. I don't know, who was your favorite?
I mean, Honeycutt saying he's great. To be or not to be, that's the motherfucking question, is genius. Like, honestly, everything he says in that scene and then his subsequent role throughout the rest of the movie is, I am always a fan. God, I talk about wrestling so much, but like, I'm always a fan of a fast talker. You know, it's like, I think back to The Sandlot as a kid when they're tossing the insults back and forth. Like, just somebody that can be weaving references together, fast talking. Like, I love that shit.
Yeah, it's so good. And Honeycutt, that character is great. I love that so much.
What about you?
Honeycutt was my answer because one, he's hilarious. That scene is so funny. And also, I think this is, again, Spike being really referential to cinema and cinema history. I don't know, did you pick up on, I feel like, what Honeycutt was referencing? The word he says, I'm sick and tired of being a N-word, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that comes up several times, which is almost explicitly, other than the part that's not, is from Sidney Lumet's Network,
yes.
which I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, which I feel like that's not the only time it comes up. He says it live on the show one time, and I believe he even says it a third time.
Well, that's true. And that is true. And Network is a very obvious influence.
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. Such a big influence.
In terms of, obviously, it's about TV. It's about like the limits
mass
that people
media,
are willing to go to and the impact of the way TV is produced on its content, all of that stuff. But also the like kind of aesthetic vision of, again, some things just being hyper real, kind of, existing outside of the normal confines of what we would expect for that space. Is also true in both movies. Yeah. The Honeycutt audition scene, and Honeycutt has a great scene later on. Like that's great. I love that. And then after the audition scenes, we have like a really big moment where Pierre takes a phone call from his mom, and to me that one's really struck me because that's the first time that Pierre becomes a human. Like he's been this kind of caricature, this weird voice. This guy that, and this was the first time that, like, having watched this, I was like, oh, Damon Wayans is great in this. Like, he is, I feel like so much of the criticism of this movie is that Damon Wayans is being weird. Like, the voice, the accent, the style. It's the point.
Yeah. And I think the conversation with his mom where, like, he becomes a 3D character kind of crystallizes that moment. And then shortly after that, we have him go see the comedian known as Junebug, I think that's his name, which we learn is his dad, Paul Mooney, played by the great Paul Mooney, who has like, I do appreciate that Spike just gives Paul Mooney like 5 minutes just to riff and be hilarious.
And it's several of his like well-known bits.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a little bit in there, that's maybe a little less well-known, or he was riffing in that, but a lot of it is stuff that he's known for.
Did you have a favorite joke? Because I did.
Did I have a favorite joke? I mean, I think so. A thing I want to reference for this section is not a joke really, but what he says to Pierre or Peerless, where he says, every N-word is an entertainer. Because I think there's a lot of things about Pierre's role and just the movie in general that are speaking to W.E.B. Du Bois's idea of double consciousness. The idea that like the trademark of Black experience in America is having to exist in two worlds simultaneously. Again, that kind of contested translator or fraught code switcher we were talking about earlier, that people who are subjugated, in particular Black people, have a unique epistemological perspective. They have unique knowledge about the people that oppress them, white people, because they have to know how to endure and survive white people while also navigating their own lives. And so, like, it was just, but again, like classic Spike Lee, very classic this movie, he doesn't say, like, Peerless / Pierre is, like, experiencing double consciousness, and, like, here's someone very didactically standing up and explaining W.E.B. Du Bois's theory. Instead, he has Paul Mooney tell a series of very funny jokes and then say this to his, son in the film.
I mean, Paul Mooney feels like he's a main character in this movie, and he's probably in the movie for like 7 minutes.
I was gonna say 7 minutes. That's
he's really good. You had a great answer. My favorite joke, which was the one that made me cackle out loud, was Paul Mooney. I feel like it was just a riff where he's like, I wrote a movie. It's called The Last White Man on Earth. There won't be no sequel. We catch him.
We catch
which
him.
is a great moment.
We catch him is good.
Yeah.
He also, Paul Mooney, is part of what makes his delivery so great is that he's so fucking smart, and he knows that he's so fucking smart, and so he just like starts laughing at his own joke as he's telling it and still crushes it. So it's just like the confidence of that delivery
and
is
like
impeccable.
I don't know, Paul Mooney's voice is really like, I don't know, Paul Mooney's just a guy that's like, he knows all of his strengths and uses them all to like in his comedy, like the voice, the delivery. Like Paul Mooney's great.
He knows what he's doing, and Spike Lee knows what he's doing with him, because part of my favorite thing, and it's why he feels so impactful even though he's only in the movie for like 7 minutes, is because he is a vessel for Spike Lee to communicate the central themes of this film without voiceover, without text on the screen, without having someone engage in like very staid, stiff, expositionary dialogue, right? Like, it's just like, no, instead we're gonna have this cutaway where Paul Mooney's just telling jokes that get to the heart of it.
And Spike is good at that. As like, I literally wrote like, Paul Mooney is making the subtext the text, and like, and that shouldn't work. I feel like most times in movies where like somebody comes out and a character is explaining to me what the point is, that's kind of annoying. But like, I don't know, Spike is really good at just laying the subtext bare. Like, the one that I was comparing it to when I was thinking about it is the way that The Big Short makes the subtext the text in a really kind of clunky ways. I don't know if you love those scenes or you hate those scenes, but the ones where there's like breakaways with characters kind of, or with like famous people kind of explaining what's going on. I don't know, that to me feels clunky, whereas Spike is really good at making the subtext text, like just straight out explicitly telling you, but at the same time doing it in a way that's like stylistic and creative and not boring, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely not boring, and I think why it works so powerfully here is, one, because Paul Mooney is, has an engine underneath them, and two, because there are so many points in this movie where it intersects with and touches other forms of media. Like, this movie is about TV, but it features the radio, it features the recording studios with the Mau Mau, it features advertisements, features kids merchandising, which we see with the minstrel masks, right? Like, it is everywhere. And so it touching on comedy and kind of this, and comedy which is very specifically this kind of underground. Paul Mooney even says, or Junebug says, I'm connected with the people. I don't need your big fame. Like, I go and tell jokes and people get it, and then I move on to the next city. He's having an, like, media is about mediation, or the mediating of images to people, right? And he is doing it in an unmediated way.
Right.
He's just saying it.
And I think Junebug and Pierre represent kind of the two options that black creatives get in Hollywood, which is be original, be yourself, and become obscure, which is what Paul Mooney, Junebug did, or tokenize your experience and create the Mantan show, which is what Pierre does. And then that kind of becomes his conflict for the rest of the movie, is Pierre knows what Pierre, like, I don't think Pierre is ever, obviously he created the show. I think that's another great moment, is that he, or not a moment, but a great thing in this movie is that he created the show knowing what it was, and then once it becomes a success, he buys into the idea. Yeah, that's just an interesting thing, that like he knows it's a racist idea, but later almost gives up on that idea.
Well, I think that at the core of a narrative of selling out is abdication of control. Right? Like, that when you sell out, it means that you no longer are in control of the product of your labor. And I think that is part of the journey for Pierre, is at earlier, I'm not totally, see, there's some part of me that I watch that movie and I watch the movie and I go, he fucking knows this is going to go this way. Like, I don't think he fully believes this idea of like, I'm going to sell them this. I think he just wants to be successful and wants the wreath, he wants the laurel around his shoulders.
It's actually a shitty show, or does he realize that is the thing that's going to get him the success he wants?
I do think it's a shitty show. I just don't think that next step there where he goes, oh, they're of course going to reject this. Like, he's been interacting with Michael Rappaport. He's not dumb. Like, I don't believe that, but I think that instead his trajectory is, I'm willing to sacrifice control, self-identity, etc., for the laurel, for the money, for the fame. And then by the end of the movie, he realizes the true cost.
Yeah. Before we move off the Paul Mooney thing, I do want to say the funniest line that he has, I think, is that Pierre asks him why he says the N-word so much. And do you remember what his response is? Paul Mooney says, "I say it 100 times every morning. It keeps my teeth white." Which is such a weird, hilarious Paul Mooney line and delivery. Yeah, Paul Mooney is great in this. Like, Paul Mooney's so good. Yeah, so shortly after we see our first iteration of the Mantan show, like what it actually is. And honestly, I think the biggest thing that is working for Spike is I think that these scenes of the Mantan show don't need that much commentary. We know what they're going to be, and they are exactly what they think we're going to be. Playing up to every stereotype, every anything. Yeah.
I mean, we know they aren't said there that I recall, but it's referenced earlier, and then we see costuming that indicates this. There are literally characters named Aunt Jemima and Sambo.
Yes,
right.
I did write those down. The characters, and there's some that are even more explicit than that. But yeah, it is exactly the kind of like racist. I don't know. I don't even know what to call it. But yeah, it is.
I mean, like literally, like explicit tropes from the antebellum period.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think this is something that's so interesting about this movie is like why Spike Lee has dislocated it back in time. And when I toss it over, right, like why didn't in the narrative of the film did they keep it as Pierre initially proposed it, like set contemporarily, but still doing it as a minstrel show, truly making it like the new millennium. And I think it's because of the educational piece of it that Spike Lee's making a very specific argument about the ways in which, quote unquote, past interpretations and models of racism are not gone. And that it's like to have the educational component, it has to display the old model.
Yeah.
Like it has to display it in very like clear terms.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that I feel like all of the Spike Lee style and flair is almost gone, and when we see scenes from the actual show, like those are long
until
takes,
later.
Until later. But the initial scenes are long, like a lot of unbroken shots, a lot of long shots. It is not Spike Lee giving that creative flair. He is presenting the like nastiness and like just pure in its purest form, I think.
It's very stark.
Yeah. We also get a set of hilarious fake commercials.
Wild.
For Da Bomb, which makes me want to get my freak on, which I love. The commercial for the energy drink Da Bomb.
This is again one of those things that like I'm glad that he has ensconced in like film history, because I think the children's, not that the children's are necessarily watching a 2000 Spike Lee film, I hope they are, but is like I think that unless you were alive in the late 90s or early 2000s, it's like hard to understand the extent to which like racism and sexism, and very particularly racialized sexism and sexist racism were just like out and about in the culture. And I don't mean the culture in a veiled way. I mean like American mass culture writ large.
It's wild.
Woo! It was really out there.
We also get the Tommy Hilfiger commercial, which I love. This was on the heels of the Tommy Hilfiger controversy, which I don't remember that well, but I believe it was Tommy Hilfiger said something to the extent of, I don't like when black people wear my clothes, is what Tommy Hilfiger's quote was. I don't remember the specifics of it, but Tommy Hilfiger said some real sideways stuff in the 90s.
I believe what he said is that it was not intended for minorities.
Right. Yeah. Because I think Snoop wore a lot of Tommy Hilfiger in the 90s, and it became kind of more streetwear. And I guess Tommy Hilfiger, the man, was not cool with that and said some really awful stuff.
So, not that fucking ADL is like who I would usually recommend, but they have an article saying that there were, since the mid-90s, there were variations on a rumor that Tommy Hilfiger was racist, anti-Semitic, and homophobic. Okay, I'm pretty sure. Is the man not gay? Anyway, that's not important. Allegedly. Anyway.
That's the catch-all. That's the beautiful phrase, allegedly.
Yeah, and that he said, something like his fashion was intended for upper-class whites, and if he had known, if he had known blacks would be wearing his clothing, he would not have made them so nice.
Yep.
That's a sentence.
Yep.
But
this is the real Tommy Hilfiger, by the way.
Yeah, but then there's like a series of mostly Oprah interviews of him talking about saying it's a malicious and completely false rumor. Either way, I think there's definitely a dynamic among fashion houses of, especially like in the 90s, it's kind of this transition towards the new millennia of like, you don't want everyday people to be wearing your clothing or versions of your clothing because it cheapens it.
Yep.
And clothing brands and fashion houses that started doing ready to wear and embraced it did pretty well. Like, this is the whole, I don't know if you saw House of Gucci, but they talk about it in the House of Gucci a fair amount, where there was like contention between different members of the family about whether or not they should be producing ready to wear things, that belts, stuff that is like of a price point that everyday people could buy one of them, like stuff like that. So regardless of allegedly whether or not he said those things directly, that was absolutely a dynamic in the 90s in particular and early 2000s of like, the quote unquote cheapening of the brand. And there's a reason that Spike is making, why it's named that specifically, it's not a coincidence.
Definitely. And, so that first episode, we see the Mantan show, and it becomes a success. And what I think is really interesting is, did you notice Spike, this seems very intentional, obviously, the first one to laugh at a joke in the Mantan show, did you notice?
Was a black man.
In the audience, who we cut back to several times because we see the white audience members looking at him to see if,
what the indication is.
Is this okay? Can I laugh at this? Which I think is, oh boy, it's just Spike putting his thumb just on the pulse so strong. Like, I don't know. Like, as two white people, I can't relate to a lot of the black experiences in this, but the idea of like white people desperate to be like accepted into that black culture, that is something that rings really true. That idea of like, is this cool? Am I cool with this? Is this all right? And that like needing that acceptance from black culture.
Who should we be taking signals from?
Right.
I mean, I think that that scene or that series of moments also really speaks to the fact that across this entire movie, Spike Lee is like creating a network of the implicated, right? Like, no one gets off scot-free. Now, obviously, Rappaport and the other people that he represents, like the white people on the board above him, the other, him and the other white men that we see like in literal blackface standing behind the stage, or behind the cameras, whatever, towards the very end of the movie, are obviously have a much greater load to bear. But he's not freeing basically anybody, right? Like, nobody walks away out of this movie going, you didn't play a role, right? There's like complicity is a spectrum, and you are somewhere on it.
And I think this movie is a great idea of like, when do I become complicit in it? Great point. Which I think also goes back to our sorry to bother you discussion, which is like, when do I become complicit in the exploitation of like workers and all that stuff? So
right, it's like, is it dichotomous? Is it like you're not or you are, but then there's a spectrum of how you are? It's kind of flirting with both. And related to complicity or being implicated, the moment in this movie that hits me the hardest emotionally, like a fucking brick, is when Womack, or as he is we see him literally transitioning, getting into the role of Sleepin' in this,
which seems to me a direct reference to like Step and Fetch It, like this old vaudevillian. Yeah.
I think it's also, Spike Lee has some characters in his films that have,
you're gonna learn something.
Yeah,
you're gonna learn a thing or two.
Yeah. So I think there's like some layered references there, but there's a series of scenes where we see Man Ray and Womack putting on the blackface makeup, putting on their gloves, putting on the lipstick, putting on the hat, and then saying showtime and kind of giving jazz hands. And we see that transition through the end of the movie in terms of their emotional response to that ritual. And towards the end, it's not like the last one, but towards the end, we see Womack doing this, and he's not crying, but just the tense, welled up emotion in his face that just clicks into a smile, but the tears are still there, is like, and this is what I mean, where it's like, Tommy, you're fucking on my boy, because
he is great in this.
He's so good.
Yeah, so good. And then we get to what's maybe one of the most interesting scenes in the movie, which is the kind of like people at the CNS channel kind of war rooming, like how they're going to fight the PR strategy. And I did write down all of their points that they make, and I do want to go over those. The 7 points that they make to fight against the PR, or 6 or 7, I don't remember what it is. But the first one is gainfully employ African Americans in front of and behind the camera. That's their first suggestion for if someone says, hey, isn't this show a little racist? You should say this. That's their first one. Their second one is let the audience decide what's racist and what's not.
It's just a book. It's like
I
straight
cannot
up
believe
a book.
This was made in 2000, because this could go for like literally every literally, like, Spike is so on the pulse in this one that like it's
prescient for 2022, and I know you're gonna hit a point that I have in my notes as like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yep. His third point is, who put these critics in charge?
This is the one.
The
where
idea,
it's actually a woman. The media consultant is a woman, where she says, what does she say? She calls the critics cultural police.
Yes, I did put that in my. Yeah, we are in that moment. Spike hit that moment so hard. The idea that like any sort of being held accountable for the things you're saying is somehow policing your speech. These are our Joe Rogan types. I guess at this point, Elon Musk, who thinks he's some sort of advocate for freedom of speech, but like,
listen, the only possible outcome of the marketplace of ideas is that their specific ideas always win.
Right. That's how it has to be, or else we did it wrong to them, or whatever. Yeah. Their fourth point is, who determines what is black? And then they're saying like, yes, but I really like this point, because this seems to be the way that like people can get out. This is actually, all these points are still things that get used every single day today. But like, she says like, yeah, Man Ray and Womack, nope, that's not their name. Man Ray and Sleep and Eat are unemployed and lazy, but we're not saying all black people are unemployed and lazy. Basically saying like, we are willing to use this very obvious trope that exists in culture, but we're not going to take the responsibility of the implications of using that trope.
Yeah, I think there's kind of the flip side of that, of like, well, why would you expect that this would depict everyone?
Right. Yeah. Which is, again, we go back to like thinking about the Club Q shooting and how right-wingers are using the idea of like using this groomer thing to apply to an entire group. Yeah. And then number 5, Mantan is a satire. That's what she says. If anybody complains, tell them this is a satire. And finally, if they can't take a joke, fuck them. Which, again, seems way too prescient for now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the thing is that the difference between then and now, so 22 years ago, is that they just fucking skip to the 6 point. They don't.
Yep.
They don't play around with the others, and certainly they wouldn't play around with that first point of the diversity of front stage and backstage.
Diversity.
Though there are liberals, right, ostensibly liberal people that are not leftists that might use that. But in terms of our like general opponents, the people that are, banging the gong of PC culture, whatever, cancel culture, they just skip right to number 6.
Yep.
They said, do not pass go.
And what I love is I feel like there's a scene in that is not going to let liberals off either, because they also say other ways for good PR are to always smile, wear kente cloth, which I love, which is going to invoke, obviously, like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer wearing kente cloths and thinking that they did something. And then just invoke the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. was one of their strategies.
Which they also love to do that.
Yep. And then another one I loved, which is just, like, Spike is just... God, Spike is like, this part of the movie seems unfair to me, because Spike is just like Aaron Judge just smacking home runs off of like just a practice pitcher. Like, he's just hitting him out of the ballpark on this one, because he also says, use the word community often.
Yes, I know. Oof.
Spike is just crushing it. And then finally, their biggest defense is Pierre himself, because as they say in the movie, Pierre is a non-threatening African-American male, and the show can't be racist because of that fact.
Because of he's involved.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there, again, the community reference is like, my God, this is why it's so important. I mean, it's important to read. It's important to read history. It's important to read past fiction. It's important to, watch older movies. Which it's wild that like a movie that came out in 2000 is an old movie now because it's over 20 years old.
Oh my God.
But because I think sometimes as leftists, it's easy to get caught up in this maelstrom of this is a uniquely, like it's a unique historical experience. How the fuck are we going to get out of this? What can we do? This is the most terrible thing that's ever happened. And it's really good to have that check of like, oh, these are conversations that have been happening. Like, there are past models of people wrestling with these ideas. And I guess on one hand, it's kind of scary because, like, they didn't solve it. But on the other hand, it's encouraging to have, like, new frameworks and lenses through which to view things that are not so new, but are rather are rooted and grounded in people before us that have, experiences that we can learn from.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So we continue on in the movie, and we see more of the Mantan show, which to me I love, because as the movie progresses, it seems like the Mantan show gets more like dark and bizarre. It's almost like by the end of the movie, I feel like the Mantan show is almost an episode of like the Eric Andre show, where it's just like deconstructing the entire idea of a show itself.
And it just is like, it moves from being like, because I think there's a lot of stuff about that antebellum era media, cartoons, the artifacts that we later see taking over Pierre's office, movies like the Song of the South, this kind of shit that is, it preaches the idea of enslaved people's passivity as an ideological tool, right? As a way of like quelling rebellion or stopping it before it starts, and also of convincing white people that this is like a sustainable operation, right? Like that you can continue to do this because they're passive and they deserve to be in these roles and they don't mind that much, that kind of thing. And like you're saying, it gets kind of surreal and even more fucked up and weird, where it's just like, what is happening here? The mask is slipping.
Yeah, and I also think Spike is doing something interesting where I don't know, a lot of this movie feels like, if you just look at the individual scenes, it feels like a movie. I don't know. I can't quite describe what I mean by that, but like there's the vintage like Spike Lee stuff, like Dutch angles, quick cuts, and all that. But all the scenes of the show are a lot more drawn out, long shots, like letting the scene play out and not necessarily funny ways.
Well, it's like recorded like masterpiece theater almost, right? It's just like boop, here we are, like we're watching it.
Yep. And then we in the middle of this we get a moment I love, which is Pierre's like vision of him accepting an award on behalf of this show. And he dubs himself, if he gets this award, he thinks he will be known as Delacroix, the Grateful Inward, which I think is just a really like devastating moment in like Pierre's psyche of like what he wants to be and
what is attainable, like the when that's your dream
of being thought of as the grateful inward, like what it's brutal.
And again it's like Spike Lee playing with notions of complicity. It's shortly around this time too that he goes on a radio show to talk about the show, to talk about his television show. And there's two things about this that kind of struck me. The first is that on the show he evokes crabs in a barrel language, which again, super prescient. Like we're still having it's not even prescient, it's just like it continues. Like we're just having the same fucking conversation for decades and decades of this idea of like that he's pushing aside criticism because people are just jealous of me, right? People are just jealous.
Haters gonna hate.
Right, hater. Yeah, exactly. So that was like the first thing of, again, another moment of like, God damn, we're just having the same conversation. And then the other thing is, because we did talk about art for a while last time and we talked about it a little bit the first time, I did want to have a art moment where in it he briefly references Rudy Giuliani making decisions about paintings and tries to compare the two, right? And he says like, you know, people shouldn't stop this show from happening, just like Giuliani shouldn't be making decisions about paintings. And if you don't know what that's referring to, do you know what that's referring to?
I believe it was a little bit of his policies on like housing and whatnot in the 90s.
So it very specifically refers to a very particular art exhibit.
Okay.
Where in 1999, so it happened just before this came out, or like probably as they were filming, honestly, wherein there's a group of artists called YBAs, or the Young British Artists, who, especially as a teen, were some of my favorite artists. Really, like perverse shit. Like one of the pieces that got Giuliani really fucking pissed off about the show was by a guy named Chris O'Feely, and it was the Virgin Mary depicted as a black woman, where elephant dung was used as part of the painting. There's like balls of it, and also where there are like little kind of, they look like cherubs or angels in the background, but they're like made out of genitals cut from porn.
I love it.
And he was very big mad about that. There was that's like one example, lot of shit like that, but the show was called The Sensation Show, and Giuliani tried to have it shut down. There were protesters that threw paint at items. If you like weird, perverse, explicit art, I highly recommend looking up the YBAs, Young British Artists, who were all associated with the Charles Saatchi or Saatchi Gallery, and looking up The Sensation Show, because there's lots of fun stuff in there. But it's interesting that he brings it up, because in that instance, Giuliani was being like anti-art, right? It was like culture war shit of like, you know, we have to defend like religious, you know, we have to enforce our religious beliefs.
That's been Giuliani's like bread and butter. Just like, let me latch onto the culture war and pretend that that's somehow valiant.
Doing something.
Yeah.
And so when he's saying this, right, he's like, Giuliani shouldn't be doing that, and y'all shouldn't be judging us, as if like creating I think the intention there, aside from just making a very recent reference, is for him to try and say like, what I'm doing is art.
Right. Yeah.
I'm making art. You can't. My art is above, you know, critique.
Did you see Borat's subsequent movie film?
I've been subjected to some of it by nature.
I think we've talked about this. You don't like cringe comedy very much, right?
I don't love it. Yeah, I don't love it.
Yeah. Well, I only bring it up because Giuliani is a star in the Borat sequel. Yeah, we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but Giuliani 100% begins to perform some sort of allegedly 100% begins to perform some sort of sexual act with a reporter he thinks is 15 years old. So just FYI, Giuliani's a creep.
Just a man of allegedly impeccable judgment.
Yeah. Not the best judgment.
Okay. That ends Hal's Art Corner.
And we eventually, so the Mantan show takes off. It becomes like a sensation. And inevitably, we get the fallout between Man Ray and Womack. And we get one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and the scene where, like, Tommy Davidson is inarguably just a powerhouse, which is the kind of breakup between Man Ray and Womack, where Tommy Davidson gives that amazing monologue. Basically, I called it the "I'll sing for you" Massa monologue, where he basically does that voice. And it's just heartbreaking and devastating. And we see that breakup between, like, the conscience of the two of them versus, Womack is being the conscience of, like, we can't keep doing this. Whereas Man Ray is kind of we have to keep doing this because the money's good. And then we get that same scene kind of play out between Sloane and Pierre. And do you remember what Pierre calls her in that scene?
I don't recall the exact language.
The help.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I do. Yes.
Yeah, brutal scene.
Yeah, it is. Again, we see the power of Jada Pinkett Smith's performance.
So good in that scene. Yeah.
Just the fire.
Yeah, she's awesome. Like, everybody's great in this movie, but that scene particularly, she is really good in. And then one thing I just shouts out to Spike because Spike is awesome, but the scene where Man Ray and Pierre are arguing in their office and the cuts back and forth with the cardboard cutouts of Mantan and Sleep and Eat as almost their shadows during the argument is, like, amazing. I love that sequence. It's so good.
Agreed.
Really, really good. So, now I gotta.
There's some time. I was gonna say there's some time.
Yeah.
I think we can get to essentially like the denouement.
Yeah, definitely. And
I do want to say there's another Honeycutt line towards the very end of the movie that I think is, again, just Spike Lee being like, I'm going to use some characters, whether they be comedians or MCs, people who are hosting diegetically to be my non-diegetic right hosts. And Honeycutt, who is dressed as Abraham Lincoln and is wearing blackface, he says 7 years ago they was kicking our black asses, but this is a new millennia, while wearing blackface, participating in a minstrel show while a crowd of white people in blackface are cheering on. And it's like, that is a moment that, again, could be overblown and overwrought. And Spike Lee just lands the plane.
Yeah. And that scene too, when they go to the audience members to, like, hear their thoughts, and it's a lot of, like, white people chiming in complete blackface, by the way, that is Spike Lee just crushing it. I love that sequence. Also, the New York Yankees guy, hate that guy, if you remember that guy. World champions 1999! As a baseball fan, 1999, the Yankees was baby Derek G. Like, if you're a baseball fan, the 1999 Yankees, which is what he's referencing in that scene, that's the most hateable year for the Yankees. We got baby Jeter, Roger Clemens at his prime being an asshole, Chuck Knobloch. This is just old school baseball.
Yeah, I was like, I know who Jeter is, but Mike is a Yankees fan. But I will say, I think the function there, right, is that this man is treating wearing blackface and attending a minstrel show as a sporting event.
Right, as another aspect of, like, his personality, of things here into. Yeah.
Well, and it is pure entertainment.
Yeah. And then we also in that sequence get the Sicilian guy who looks like Tim Heidecker, who brings up a really interesting point because somebody says like you're not black or something like that, and he's like I'm Sicilian, which like is not far from history because like I think that's a moment of Spike being like blackness has always been a construct and like used by white people to be like whatever we dislike we will call black, because that guy's not lying. There was a time when Italian people were considered not non-white or whatever,
minoritized.
Because blackness and whiteness are just a way for like white people to otherize and create an in crowd, I guess.
Right, and to maintain power and a constituency in a fluid way as power demands. I think like that's what he's doing is referencing that, but also referencing the way in which white people, I think particularly white people of like previously white ethnic minorities. I mean, being an Italian American is not a white ethnic minority even anymore, but of these previously minoritized white ethnicities use that to distance themselves from either racism that other white people are perpetuating or from their own racism, or to try and make themselves on the in-group with black people or other minoritized racial groups that they perceive to be like have some benefit associated with them. But yeah, I agree. He's kind of he's kind of going like, we're going to hit the big beats here. We're going to hit the major beats as we go. It's also in this part where I noticed for the first time, this is probably the fifth time when I watched it this week, it was probably the fifth time I've seen this movie, that the sound stage was no longer said applause and it said howl.
Howl. I saw that too.
I had not noticed that before, and I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Dan thinks of everything.
Yeah.
Totalizing filmmaker. You know? Head to toe.
Yeah, so we get the point where finally after Man Ray and Womack have their kind of breakup, Man Ray has that moment where he decides he's not going to do it anymore, and he comes out on camera without makeup and says, I'm sick and tired of being a N-word, and I am not going to take it anymore, which to me another reference to Network, that famous line, like, I'm not going to take it anymore. And immediately following that, we see Man Ray getting kidnapped by Mau Mau, the rap group who decide they are going to kind of perform this stunt, this thing to kind of make a point.
Real quick on the dance, I think that Spike Lee's function in having him reiterate the same line that he speaks earlier is to demonstrate that context does matter, because him dressed in his street clothes, not wearing the makeup, and delivering an empathetic performance.
Yeah, it's a shocking moment.
Dancing in that specific stage context is a shocking moment that has a different meaning than him doing so while smiling, wearing the blackface makeup, wearing the top hat, wearing the suit, and smiling, right? So I think that's really powerful, because I think there is maybe a potential interpretation of the movie that's like, there is no way to speak about race critically and reference these past tropes without replicating them. And it's like, that's a really crystallized moment where it's like, no, it's very clear that he's disrupting them. And then the other thing is the way that dance is filmed is fucking beautiful, because I don't know, I'm not like a cinematographer or director of photography or any of that fun stuff. But I think what they're doing is they're using like a slower shutter speed so that there is a blur, right? It's not catching all of the minute movements. And that is really beautiful too, because it feels like he's kind of dragging through time. It doesn't feel clean and punctuated. It really leads to like the expressiveness of it. And I just thought that was a really beautiful moment of filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are, in the final act of this movie, there are so many moments like that. The big one for me was, so Mau Mau kidnaps Man Ray, and to make a point, they literally make him dance for them by shooting at his feet to make him dance, and then actually kill him. They shoot and kill Man Ray, and then the immediate cut from that is Pierre watching the coin bank of the like kind of racist artifact of like the black man, like the bank that eats the coin. So it goes straight from Man Ray being shot and killed to Pierre watching his bank feed itself the money again and again, which is just like, goddamn, Spike is just
and
crushing it.
The immediate shots before that are of the animated intro to the movie or to the show, which they are which the Mau Mau are recreating. Mm-hmm. So like you have this parallelism of like, here is the racist television, here is the violence enacted due to kind of like intergroup conflict over that depiction, and then like here is the profit motive continuing to control the person. Like it's just very like synthesizes the whole movie.
And then we see the Mau Mau getting this is something you referenced earlier, the Mau Mau getting caught by the police. I don't know if that's the right word, but shot, and the only one who survives is 1/16th, played by MC Serch, who keeps shouting out, why didn't you kill me?
It only takes one drop is what like he's yelling over and over again.
Yeah. Just God, that moment is so good. And again, MC Serch is just, I don't know, I don't know. I guess I never really figured MC Serch to be a great dramatic performance, but like he's carrying a lot of weight in this movie, and he does it really, really well.
I think he's a little well acquainted with what he's communicating.
100%.
You dig?
And then we get a great vintage Spike moment, which is Jada Pinkett Smith having been confronted with all of these things, moving through Pierre's office and all those Dutch angles, and we see Jada Pinkett Smith with all the Dutch angles of not just Pierre, but the like little racist tchotchkes and artifacts that he collects.
There's a lot of them. They've
grown.
There
are a lot of them. And the movie does name drop Whoopi Goldberg. And do you know Whoopi Goldberg has like an extensive collection of like racist black artifacts?
I did not. I kind of assumed they were referencing her in that part because of the Ted Danson of it all.
Oh my God. I always forget that Ted Danson. We should have done that, and like an extensive list of people who did blackface and got away with it somehow that we don't talk about. Jimmy Fallon, Ted Danson, Billy Crystal. You want to add any?
Those, you hit the main. Yeah. Ted Danson's just always the one that I'm like, wow, man.
That one was bizarre because if you watch that, Ted Danson was like, I'm crushing this. People are gonna love this.
Pretending to be Whoopi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were dating at the time.
It is disastrous. It is insane.
Yeah. Whew. So, but no, I did not know that. I assumed that it was related.
Yeah,
to
Whoopi
that
has like
incident.
an insane collection of like racist memorabilia and things like that. So yeah, and then finally we get that kind of that vintage Spike moment again, where Jada literally tells him, "Look at what you've contributed to," and she shows him that video of the show, and then that kind of bleeds over into the credit sequence where we see all these actual footage of real racist like blackface tropes throughout history and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think I will say as he dies, and he says the James Baldwin quote. That's the one part of the movie that I think actually is like too heavy-handed, like is too on the nose.
Okay.
I think that, if he just died and didn't say that, like we're getting the same message.
That's a Spike thing. Yeah. Like we're going to lay it on. We're going to make the subtext text. Right. Like in case you didn't get it, let me put this over there.
But I do really love the ending shot where, it's Man Ray's face and Delacroix's or Dothan's laughter is happening, like kind of peeling over it. And then the crowd's laughter, and we never see the crowd again, joins in. And it's like, that is, again, who is implicated? All y'all. Everybody.
Yeah.
You right now watching this. Like, it is, I think, punches home the idea a lot better than Pierre saying, And James Baldwin said that you live the life that you deserve, that you've sowed. If you made your bed, you're gonna lie in it. Yeah, okay, man, we got it. You're dead.
Yeah. Yeah, he leaves them on the line. Always keep them laughing, is what he says as he is dying after Jada Pinkett Smith
shot him.
Straight up murks him, yeah. She kills him. So normally we will end with our conservative dipshit moment, but unfortunately, none of these dipshits were dipshit enough to even dare touch Spike Lee's Bamboozled. So I could not find a Armand White. I could not find a Ben Shapiro. I could not find nary Steven Crowder to comment on Bamboozled. So we live in a better world where these people have not commented on Bamboozled, and we get the final word on Bamboozled. Hal, what's your final word on Bamboozled?
More people should watch this movie.
Yep.
More people should treat Spike Lee like the living American masterpiece artist that he is.
Yep.
And Damon Wayans should not simply be relegated to comedies.
Yeah, he is great in this. He's amazing in this. Spike Lee is great. He is our one of our greatest living filmmakers. We both love this movie. We love this movie.
It's on, I will say this, it's on Canopy.
I don't know what that is.
What? Oh my God, I'm so excited to tell you this. And also, maybe there are people listening to this who don't know what Canopy is.
Okay.
Canopy with a K.
Okay.
Is a streaming site
that
you can access via the library. I will say not all libraries have the same pool.
Okay.
The Leon County Library in Tallahassee, Florida, has a sick license through Canopy.
Hell yeah.
The limit is that you can only watch, I don't know if this is the same everywhere, but in Tallahassee, through the Leon County Library system, you're limited to 8 views a month.
Okay.
But if you have a library card, it's totally free.
Hell yeah.
And if you don't have a library card, you can literally sign up digitally for a library card and then immediately access Canopy in moments. You don't have to wait for a card or something. And it has a really strong base of world cinema, independent cinema, documentaries, just good ass shit. There's a ton of stuff on there. Like, there's stuff that I can't find anywhere else that I can find on Canopy. A lot of LGBTQ plus cinema, fucking worth it. A lot of noir on there. If you're trying to close out Noir November, this will come out before then. But noir is a all year round thing. Download Canopy, and you can watch Bamboozled on it.
Hell yeah, because I have the Bamboozled Criterion, but I also had to rent it because who cares? There was a reason that I had to rent it on Amazon, and only the SD version is available online. So this is, again, physical media crushing it because the Criterion is great. I've also watched it on the Criterion Collection. So yeah, Bamboozled is awesome. I love Bamboozled. This was a great episode. I love this. I loved watching this movie. I love talking about movies with you.
Yeah, same.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Well, we will be back in a couple weeks to talk about a new movie, which we're being unnecessarily cagey about. But it'll be a new movie in a couple weeks. And
tell a friend.
Tell a friend. Oh, I forgot about to do that.
Subscribe.
I'm really bad at that. But yes, please, if you've made it this far, please make sure that you like and subscribe and comment and do all those things that the algorithms demand. I know they seem foolish and stupid because who cares if you click 5 stars on iTunes, but it does make a difference. So please.
2 people have rated us so far. I love them both.
Oh, and shouts out to Yusuf. Yusuf is one of the first people that I've met via Twitter and online. Yusuf has commented on the website saying he loved one of our discussions. So shouts out to Yusuf. Be more like Yusuf and make a comment and subscribe, and then maybe I'll shout you out. That seemed way too aggro and aggressive. Do it if you want. But shouts out Yusuf. Yusuf, you seem cool as hell.
Shouts out. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, I didn't tell you about that, but me and Yusuf have talked a little bit on Twitter. So yeah. Hell yeah. This was great. We will see you all next time. Kill, 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 kill the porn. Kill, 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 kill the porn. Kill, 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 kill the porn.